Bleach. Studying medicine can't save the spirit world. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyright or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 501. Next time, promise. Yuna Hanaretsu's eyes, which were originally gently squinting, slowly opened a little, and a dim light in them flowed slightly, reflecting the appearance of Senju Cheng. For a long time, Yuna Hanaretsu seemed to want to say something many times, but in the end he did not speak. Senju Cheng sighed slightly and explained. Yuna Hana teacher, I'm sorry, only in this world, Kazi. But before Senju Cheng finished speaking, Yuna Hanaretsu's white and beautiful index finger suddenly appeared at Senju Cheng's lips, making a hushing gesture. Yuna Hanaretsu spoke gently. No need to explain, just tell me, is the agreement still valid? Agreement? Senju Cheng was slightly startled, and several agreements he and Yuna Hanaretsu had made emerged in his mind. Of course. Senju Cheng gazed at Yuna Hanaretsu in front of him gently, and answered without hesitation. In response, Yuna Hanaretsu responded with a gentle smile, as if all the words were attributed to a silent understanding. The gentle and dignified temperament and the bright and beautiful face made Senju Cheng's heart throb uncontrollably, and his throat was a little dry. Then, Senju Cheng asked in a slightly hoarse and low voice. Teacher, can I come back to soak in the hot spring tonight? Yuna Hanaretsu seemed to be stunned for a moment, and a gentle smile appeared on his face to acquiesce, and excitement subconsciously appeared in his eyes. However, before Yuna Hanaretsu could say anything, a slender and petite figure appeared in the direction of the Yunahana courtyard entrance. Broken B. In an instant, Senju Cheng's expression changed, and he changed the gentleness that was revealed as Senju Cheng and hurriedly said in the tone of Kurosaki Makoto. Captain Yunahana, excuse me. Almost as soon as the voice fell, Senju Cheng used the failing kick and disappeared without a trace in an instant. Seireitei, who seemed to be so paranoid that she was furious, directly crossed the courtyard in midair with instant step in front of Yuna Hanaretsu, and quickly chased in the direction where Senju Cheng left. However, Yuna Hanaretsu just watched this scene gently, without any intention of getting angry at Seireitei's rudeness. I'm so sorry, Captain Seireitei. It seems that my Makoto has caused you a lot of trouble, but it seems that Captain Seireitei can't catch up with Makoto today. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Tonight, I will teach him a lesson. As Yuna Hanaretsu thought silently in his heart, the smile on his face can be said to be both gentle and extremely sinister. 2 days passed in a flash. As the situation inside the Seireitei became relatively stable, the Gotti 13 finally had enough energy to aid their attitudes towards the travel disasters such as Kurosaki Makoto. Unlike the original track, only some captains of the Heikoro such as Kurosaki Ichigo bid farewell at the gate of the world. Due to the almost extraordinary combat power of Senju Cheng, captains such as Yamamoto Seireitei Shichikuni and others took the Heikoro very seriously. Therefore, in addition to a series of farewell ceremonies personally hosted by the Captain General Yamamoto Seireitei Shichikuni, the actions of the Heikoro are defined as the great heroes who saved the Seireitei this time, and Senju Cheng was regarded as an important ally. Kurosaki Ichigo also obtained the identity of Death God Proxy. As for the original execution of Kachika Rukia, under the influence of the attitudes of Kachika Byakuya and Jikita Jushiro, and the importance that the Heikoro attached to Kachika Rukia, in addition, the central 46 rooms were slaughtered by Aizen Sasuke, and even the Noble Street was destroyed, so naturally no one opposed Yamamoto Seireitei Shichikuni's decision to change Kachika Rukia's sentence to not guilty. In front of the gate opened by the 13th Division, all the 9 active captains, headed by Yamamoto Seireitei Shichikuni, gathered here. Standing opposite the captains in front of the gate were Senju Cheng, Kurosaki Ichigo, Ishidori and Nyorai. Among them, Yukita Jushiro, as the representative of Yamamoto Seireitei Shichikuni, spoke with a kind face. Mr. Kurosaki Makoto, then I'll leave the follow-up assistance to you. Senju Cheng nodded and responded. Don't worry, Captain Yukita, Aizen Sasuke's evil deeds seem to cause serious chaos to the world, and I won't sit idly by. After a pause, Senju Cheng said with a bit of apology. On the contrary, this time, due to the issue of Rukia's execution, I was too reckless to rush into the Seireitei, causing extremely serious chaos and destruction, which gave Aizen Sasuke an opportunity to take advantage of it. Mr. Kurosaki Makoto doesn't need to blame himself for this. All the faults are on Aizen Sasuke, and Mr. Kurosaki Makoto was just used. Yukita Joshiro said. Yes. Senju Makoto nodded and said. In that case, let's return to the human world first. If you need any help, just ask. Goodbye, Mr. Kurosaki Makoto. Yukita Joshiro waved his hand with a warm face, turned his eyes to the people behind Senju Makoto, and said. And Mr. Kurosaki Ichigo, Mr. Ishidarai and Ms. Inaori time, we will meet again in the human world if there is a chance. It must be said that Yukita Joshiro's affinity is quite strong, and even Ishidarai, who used to be his opponent, hurriedly returned the greeting to Yukita Joshiro. Then, Senju Makoto's eyes first swept over the dignified Yamamoto Jinrai Shichikuni, then looked around at the other captains and waved his hand. Everyone, see you next time. In response, many captains reacted differently. Some were similar to Kachika Byakuya, who looked arrogant, and some had strange expressions like Kurosachi Mayuri. Goodbye, Mr. Kurosaki Makoto. Yuna Hanaretsu said gently. Damn Kurosaki Makoto, you wait for me. Soifong. See you next time, guys. Kukushansui. While Senju Makoto smiled and responded one by one, his eyes quietly engraved Yuna Retsu's figure in his heart, and responded silently in his heart. Yuna teacher, next time, this will be the last time we part. There'll never be a next time, please wait a little longer. Then, the gate opened, and Makoto Senju walked in first. Ichigo Kurosaki, Ryashida, and Orai Imanue also hurriedly said goodbye to their friends they met in the Seireitei, and followed Makoto Senju in. Soon, as the gate opened on the other side of the real world, Makoto Senju and his group stepped out, while Kisuke Uehara, Yorishi Shiuin, Teskori and others were already waiting there in advance. Welcome back, Kisuke Uehara said in a somewhat nonchalant tone, and then seemed to notice something and asked in surprise. Huh? How come I haven't seen you for a few days? Why does Makoto Kurosaki look paler and more tired than before? P.S. I'm stuck, so there are only 2 updates today, sorry. Chapter 502. Just announcement. As soon as Uehara Kisuke said this, everyone's eyes unconsciously turned to Senju Makoto. It seems to be true. Shiuin Yorishi came in front of Senju Makoto and looked at him closely, with a face full of suspicion. Before Uehara Kisuke and Shiuin Yorishi left Soul Society early, they had met Senju Makoto once. At the time, although Senju Makoto had fought with Yamamoto Jinrai Shichikuni not long ago, Senju Makoto's eyebrows and eyes did not show any signs of fatigue. Now, Senju Makoto not only looks much paler, but also has a faint sense of fatigue and sleepiness between his eyebrows and eyes. In an instant, being questioned by Shiuin Yorishi at close range, Senju Makoto's surface was calm and pushed it off to Soifong's constant harassment, which made him exhausted. But in fact, Senju Makoto was undoubtedly almost exhausted from bathing in the hot spring. Yuna Hanaretsu had accumulated the urge to fight for decades, and Senju Makoto had to bear it completely in just 2 nights. How long had he fought against Yamamoto Jinrai Shichikuni? Senju Makoto and Yuna Hanaretsu fought each other with pure kendo for 2 whole nights. Once, it was even too intense. Although Senju Makoto used spirit control to lay dozens of layers of ghost barriers to cover it, there was still a slight aftermath that leaked out, waking up in Inaori time, and then he was almost discovered by Inaori time. Then, Senju Makoto and Uehara Kisuke and others gathered for a short while and exchanged plans. Then Senju Makoto sent Kurosaki Ichigo, Ishidarai and Inaori home respectively, and then went back to the direction of the flower shop. From a distance, Senju Makoto saw the bright but soft flower shop sign. As Makoto Senju opened the door of the flower shop, 2 familiar figures appeared in front of Makoto Senju, Synopsis, who was using the REM puppet, and Neon, who was using the shadow puppet. Synopsis and Neon bowed to Makoto Senju at the same time, and said with a bright smile. Welcome back, Storm Manager. Well, I'm back. At the same time, inside the main hall of Yutomundo's Yuto Night Palace, Aizen Sasuke changed into a white and black-edged Yuto Night Palace long gown, with his brown hair combed back almost like a slick, a strand of hair hanging between his arrogant and indifferent eyes, and slowly walked out from behind the main hall. Following Aizen Sasuke was Araki Furuta, Tsurunkane, and Ichimura Jin, who were wearing similar Yuto Night Palace costumes. At this moment, Aizen Sasuke sat directly on the throne of the main hall like a king strolling in his territory, looking down at the 10 blades standing in 2 rows below. Among them, except for the vacant position at the front, the ones standing in order behind were Stark, Byakuya, Parable, Ulkira, Nell, Grimjow, Zamali, Rupi, Aranilo, and Yami. As for Zaraki Futea, Tosunkane, and Ichimura Jin, who were following behind Aizen Sasuke, they were about to go to the front of the position where the 10 Espadas stood below. Aizen Sasuke pointed to the corner beside his throne and said, "Zaraki-kun, you can stand here." "Yes." Zaraki Futea responded with no expression on his face. As he stood still, the expressions at Tosunkane, Ichimura Jin, and the 10 Espadas all changed slightly. Under Zaraki Futea's glance, Tosunkane's expression undoubtedly looked unusually ugly. However, Zaraki Futea's eyes quickly passed Tosunkane and looked at the little lily with late green hair and drooling standing in the number 5 position among the 10 Espadas. Unlike the original track, after Nell's mask was broken and her power was lost, she escaped from the Huko Palace under the protection of her 2 subordinates and began to wander. Nell was studied and treated by Makoto Senju as soon as her mask was broken, so the power lost was not great, and her condition was much better than in the original track. Although Makoto Senju had not had time to further treat Nell in the past, Nell could freely restore her original form at any time. As a result, Nell's current state of returning to her original form is quite unstable, and she can only passively restore when her emotional fluctuations reach a certain level. However, as the only 2 vast old-level hollows with independent Aaron Saver in the past in Huko Mundo, she was still given the number 5. Just as Zaraki Sawai looked at the members of the 10 Espada below thoughtfully, comparing the various information told by Makoto Senju, Aizen Sasuke, who was sitting on the throne, slowly spoke. "Everyone, this is the first gathering of the 10 Espadas in the true sense. Here, I need to announce an appointment first." In an instant, everyone's eyes were almost instantly attracted to it, and Aizen Sasuke raised his hand and gestured to Zaraki Futaba. "Zaraki Futaba, from now on, he is the king's left hand, and he enjoys a status and power second only to me in the Palace of the Night." There is no doubt that this statement almost instantly caused a lot of dissatisfaction as soon as it came out, unlike Ichimura Jin's smiling expression that seemed to be completely indistinguishable from other emotions, Tosunkane's face seemed to be even darker. As for the rebellious people among the 10 Espadas, they were dissatisfied and angry about the sudden appearance of the Shinigami Zaraki Futaba being given the status and power of the king's left hand, which was completely above them. Zaraki Futaba, an unknown person who has never been heard of, and it seems that he didn't play any role in the Soul Society. Yami grinned and questioned without hesitation. "Wow, you look so weak, but you still want to be superior to me." Grimjow licked his lips, staring at Zaraki Futai with a fighting spirit in his eyes. Bylajin, who was standing in the No. 2 position, spoke with murderous intent. "The king's left hand is not so easy to be careful that it will be rotten at any time." For a moment, a series of terrifying spiritual pressures almost simultaneously pressed towards Zaraki Futai, as if to make Zaraki Futai embarrassed on the spot. Suddenly, an almost immeasurable huge spiritual pressure erupted from Aizen Sasuke's body, protecting Zaraki Futai by his side. At this moment, the entire Gynecology Palace seemed to be trembling faintly, and some subordinates in the Gynecology Palace almost fell into a coma instantly, and even Tosunkane, Ichimura Jin and the 10 Espadas below almost felt a huge sense of oppression. Then, Aizen Sasuke's drooping eyelids slightly raised, looked down at the people below, and said slowly, "Gentlemen, please don't misunderstand one thing, this is not a discussion, it's just an announcement." Chapter 503 The King's Left Hand Fear. Under the seemingly endless spiritual pressure of Aizen Sasuke, and the seemingly indifferent and light words, some of the Espadas instinctively felt fear in their hearts. Compared with decades ago, when Aizen Sasuke and Ashura fought and agreed to become the kings of Huko Mundo, the spiritual pressure of Aizen Sasuke is undoubtedly more terrifying. In fact, even the Espadas, who are vast old-level Aranseis, have no idea how terrible it is. Hengoku. In an instant, in the Hunya Palace, where the information about the Hengokus also spread, the Espadas almost subconsciously thought of the Hengoku. However, as the spiritual pressure erupted by Aizen Sasuke became more and more terrifying, the atmosphere seemed to be shaking, as if even the air was difficult to breathe, and the chaotic thoughts in the hearts of the Espadas almost disappeared instantly. On the contrary, Zaraki Futai seemed to be unaffected, and looked at Aizen Sasuke who was standing beside the throne with some surprise. Such protection made Zaraki Futai feel a little flattered. A moment later, when the 10 espadrilles were already sweating profusely, and the 10 espadrilles at the bottom of the ranking were almost about to fall into a coma due to the unbearable spiritual pressure, the spiritual pressure of Aizen Sasuke that enveloped the entire Kainiac slowly dissipated. At this moment, the 10 espadrilles completely realized what a terrifying king Aizen Sosok was. The gap between the two sides was simply difficult to measure. In this case, I wonder if you understand what I mean? Aizen Sosok asked lightly. Yes, then, including the most unyielding Byakugan, the 10 espadrilles almost all bowed slightly to Zaraki Futetsuaya and spoke. Greetings to Lord the King's left hand, Futei Zaraki. Hearing the voices in unison, Aizen Sosok's silence drooped slightly again, as if he was feeling something. He was not enjoying the submission and flattery of the 10 espadas, but the feeling of Futei Zaraki, who represented a part of Makautao-kun's will, by his side. After a moment, Aizen Sosok sighed softly. Futei Zaraki is not Makautao-kun after all. Aizen Sosok turned to look at the expressionless and delicate Futei Zaraki beside him, and seemed to see a familiar shadow beside Futei Zaraki, thinking silently. However, in consideration of your status as Makautao-kun's past friend and ally, I will grant you a status equal to Makautao-kun's friendship. Feeling Aizen Sosok's gaze, Futei Zaraki, who was in a certain rational state almost every moment, spoke. The king's left hand. Aizen, do I have any responsibilities? No, the role of the left hand is just to accompany the king. After a pause, Aizen Sosok seemed to have thought of something and spoke. Of course, if necessary, it would be even better if I could solve some small troubles for the king. Please go ahead. Zaraki Fuaya spoke directly. Unlike the arrogant contempt he showed to other beings including the Espada, Aizen Sosok spoke to Zaraki Fuaya with a little more patience and gentleness. The Espada are the strongest group of Aransei. However, the Nort among the Espada has disappeared for decades, so if possible, please help me find the trace of the Nort. As soon as these words came out, Hannibal, Nell and Grimjow among the Espada looked at Zaraki Fuaya at the same time. The ability of Zaraki Futaba, Spirit Particle Illusion, allows him to merge with spirit particles, thereby controlling spirit particles within a certain range and enveloping his consciousness within the corresponding range. There is no doubt that in the worlds composed of spirit particles such as Hukomundo and Soul Society, as long as Zaraki Futaba is given enough time to merge spirit particle illusion, 99% of the secrets of the entire world cannot be hidden from Zaraki Futaba. Okay. What is the name of the Nort among the 10 Espadas? What are his appearance characteristics? Zaraki Futaba asked. His name is Ashwara Kautamari, and he completely disappeared after the battle with the king of the former Great Hollow Forest decades ago. However, according to Haribal's information, Ashwara Kautamari should be the final winner, and he may just be injured and asleep for some reason. After a pause, Aizen Sosok continued. Of course, for decades, the Huko Soul Society has been searching for Ashwara Cheng's traces, but there has never been any trace. But now that we are about to have a decisive battle with Soul Society, Ashwara Cheng's power is also an indispensable part, so we can only ask Zaraki-kun for help. As Aizen Sosok finished speaking, Ulkira below reached out and grabbed his eyeball, took it out of his eye socket, and crushed it with his 5 fingers. Shared eye realm. The crushed eyeball dissipated into spirit particles and quickly formed an image. Under the seemingly eternal moon in the dark night of Hukomundo, a figure stood on a high tower with an elegant posture. It was the image that Makautao Senju once left in Ulkira's memory when he communicated with him and the identity of Ashwara Cheng in the Huko Soul Society. Instantly, Hannibal and Nell's eyes were clearly filled with excitement, especially Nell, who blurted out "Father." However, soon, the image of Ashwara Cheng disappeared in the main hall, and Ulkira's missing eyeball was restored through super speed regeneration. Zaraki-san nodded to indicate that he understood, and spoke without a single fluctuation in his tone. I see, I understand, I'll pay attention. Then I'll leave this matter to Zaraki-kun, Aizen Sosok said, and then the specific agenda of this 10 Espada meeting really began. Unlike the Huko Palace that was once ruled by Byakugan, the current Huko Palace has undoubtedly become the ruling center of the entire Hukomundo. Whether it is the desert on the surface of Hukomundo or the Great Hollow Forest hidden deep underground, it has been completely brought under the rule of the Huko Palace in name. Moreover, under the 10 Espada who represent the strongest group of Aranseis, each of them not only has subordinates, but also has their own areas in Hukomundo that they need to manage and rule. Next, Aizen Sosok undoubtedly plans to gather the manpower and resources that can be mobilized in the entire Hukomundo, and let the 10 Espadas find and provide some special hollows as required. As for the purpose, Aizen Sosok undoubtedly intends to use the power of Hoyoku to create some special Aranseis with a large number of hollows as materials. Chapter 504. Lion River Plain at one time, while Soul Society and Hukomunda were both entering a state of war and each began to nervously integrate their manpower and resources, the summer town of Karakura was unusually peaceful and leisurely. Since the school was on vacation, Senju Makutō, who had just returned to the flower shop, did not need to continue to attend classes at school, which made Senju Makutō a little unaccustomed. At this moment, sitting in the flower shop, Senju Makutō was arranging flowers when he had nothing to do. Manager, chilled watermelon. Nyan said expressionlessly, put down the things in his hands, and then turned around to continue busying himself in the kitchen. However, Senju Makutō looked down at the watermelon in front of him. Not only were all the seeds picked out, but they were also carved into extremely cute and delicate rabbit shapes. Really attentive, Senju Makutō couldn't help but exclaim. TSK. Yorishi, who had returned to the form of a black cat, lay down in his own cat bed and said disdainfully. A meaningless flattery. What's the matter with Kurosachi Mayuri? He announced that Totonashi was dead in the Seireitei, but he sent Totonashi to work in your store. Makutō Senju said one watermelon after another in the shape of a rabbit. He then hugged Kuronko Yorishi in his arms, stroked Kuronko Yorishi's hair, which was incomparable to his touch, and said, Isn't it that the cat has low self-esteem? He thinks Totonashi has mastered a skill that the cat doesn't have. Kuronko Yorishi, who had originally looked like he was enjoying himself, became furious almost instantly, suddenly jumped from Makutō Senju's arms to the table in front of him, raised his head slightly, and said, Low self-esteem. Just picking up some watermelon seeds to make a shape. When I was able to carve the head of the hollow into this, Kuronko Yorishi had not yet been born. Suddenly, Kuronko Yorishi looked at Makutō Senju's eyes, which were revealing a bit of playfulness, and completely realized that he seemed to have been fooled. Wait, Kuronko Yorishi turned his elegant figure slightly, then jumped onto Senju Makutō's shoulder, stretched out his pink tongue and licked Senju Makutō's cheek, saying, Mr. Kurosaki Makutō deliberately provoked me like this, didn't he want to attract my attention? But it's true, even Mr. Kurosaki Makutō, after knowing the so-called Shibuin family, did he also have the idea of hanging out with a rich woman in the modern world? How is it possible? Senju Makutō retorted. Really? Kuronko Yorishi leaned close to Senju Makutō's ear and whispered. By the way, in fact, when I return to my original form, it's not impossible to retain a little bit of cat characteristics. Don't human men like these very much? Senju Makutō. It must be said that Kuronko Yorishi's words almost make normal human men have no resistance. But fortunately, Senju Makutō's essence is a noble and pure death god. Therefore, Senju Makutō grabbed Kuronko Yorishi from his shoulders and gently stroked him, proving himself. I'm not that kind of person. A real man is born between heaven and earth. How can he live under a cat for a long time? Kuronko Yorishi enjoyed Senju Makutō's almost perfect cat stroking skills, and unconsciously made a lazy and comfortable cry, saying, Meow. Senju Makutō. At this moment, a trace of doubt flashed in Senju Makutō's eyes that seemed to be in a dilemma. Compared with the past, Kuronko Yorishi was undoubtedly much more proactive than before, and he teased her many times in an open way, but in fact, he was hiding all kinds of temptations. Yorishi, did you guess something? Maybe you suspected something. While Senju Makutō maintained the persona of Kurosaki Makutō, various speculations emerged one after another. In fact, because the four nobles have a deep connection with Hyoshogu Ichibure and the Soul King Palace, and because Senju Makutō knows the truth that the ancestors of the four nobles once cooperated with Hyoshogu Ichibure to dismember and control the Soul King. In addition to the Shiba family, who once stood on the opposite side of Hyoshogu Ichibure and opposed the dismemberment of the Soul King, due to various secret information, Senju Makutō had to be quite cautious and suspicious of the four nobles. Treat, Shifuin Yorishi. Based on his understanding and familiarity with Shifuin Yorishi, Senju Makutō is naturally willing to believe her, but due to the position of the Shifuin family and Urahara Kisuke's close friend who is full of suspicion, Senju Makutō has to be a little vigilant and defensive against her. At this moment, the door of the flower shop was suddenly kicked open, bang. The glass door shattered instantly, a large amount of glass shards scattered all over the ground, and the twisted door frame flew several meters away until it fell heavily at Senju Makutō's feet. Senju Makutō. Making trouble? As a famous figure in Karakura town, and secretly the vice captain of the 4th Division, the No. Lord of the Ten Espada, and the master of name, Senju Cheng has lived in Karakura town for several years, but this is the first time he has encountered such a thing. So, for a moment, Senju Cheng was a little confused. Then, a boy with a shaved punk head, wearing a high school uniform, and a string of Buddhist beads hanging around his waist walked out. His somewhat inverted triangle eyes swept around the flower shop and he spoke arrogantly. Is the Queency Kurosaki Cheng here? This flower shop looks very ordinary. At this moment, what caught the eyes of the punk-haired boy were three faces with strange and shocked expressions and a black cat that seemed to have stood up in shock. However, the next moment, as the punk-haired boy saw clearly the appearance of the puppets used by Synopsis and Neon, his eyes almost instantly showed a heart shape. Then, the punk-haired boy's eyes moved between Synopsis and Neon dozens of times, and then he went directly to Synopsis' side, rubbing his hands nervously, and said, "My name is Shisaka Wahara, may I know what to call this beautiful lady?" Synopsis looked down at the glass shards scattered on the ground, and then looked at the empty door of the flower shop, ignoring Shisaka Wahara, and turned his head to look at Senju Cheng. Synopsis didn't say anything, but Senju Cheng had obviously read the meaning in Synopsis' eyes. "Can I eat him?" Obviously, Synopsis was completely angered. Whether it was Shisaka Wahara's rudeness to Senju Cheng or his destruction of the flower shop, it was no less than an extreme provocation and anger to the former king of Hukomundo. However, Shisaka was obviously unaware of this. Instead, he followed Synopsis' gaze and looked at Senju Cheng. He curled his lips slightly and said arrogantly, "Hey, you are not Kurosaki Cheng, are you?" Chapter 505. Skin Intimacy. Shisaka's attitude is undoubtedly like that of a bad boy looking for trouble. More importantly, Senju Cheng sensed that Shisaka's spiritual pressure was quite average, probably close to the level of the vice-captain of the 13th Gotti squad. Is he so arrogant because of something? Senju Cheng sensed the changes in the spiritual power and the amount of spiritual pressure outside the flower shop, and while holding Kuronko Yorishi back in his arms and gently stroking him, he remained silent and fell into speculation. However, in Shisaka's eyes, Senju Cheng's reaction was undoubtedly more like a reaction of showing weakness. He stroked his punk hair with both hands and said, "Are you scared and dare not speak?" It turns out that the Queency is a group of cowards. However, what Shisaka didn't realize was that Synopsis, who was maintaining the ragdoll behind him, almost looked like he was going to eat Shisaka alive. Obviously, under Shisaka's repeated and powerless emphasis, although Senju Cheng didn't care about this meaningless provocation, it completely aroused Synopsis' murderous intent. However, with Shiwu and Yorishi watching, Senju Cheng naturally did not allow Synopsis to reveal his identity as a Vastop-level Arensei, and slowly shook his head to remind Synopsis. HMPH. Seeing this, Shisaka, who looked arrogant and bad, became even more arrogant, strode in front of Senju Cheng, and sat down on the table. Shisaka even thought that the cat bed and cat bowl placed in the corner of the table were too much of a hindrance, and slapped the cat bed and cat bowl away. In an instant, the black cat Yorishi, who had just been comforted by Senju Cheng in his arms, froze his tail instinctively, turned his head and stared at Shisaka, and his cat pupils narrowed slightly, but the next moment, Senju Cheng's palm covered the black cat Yorishi's head, accurately grasping the most sensitive point of the black cat Yorishi and gently stroking it. Meow! The black cat Yorishi almost instinctively shouted out in comfort. Then, Shisaka put one of his heels on the table, looked down at Senju Cheng who was constantly petting the cat with an arrogant attitude, and said, "Hey, I'm asking you a question, can't you hear me? I'm asking you if you are Kurosaki Cheng." "Yes, I am." Senju Cheng replied with a smile and reminded. "Also, Shisaka-san, although you were in high school, it is still not good to be too arrogant." This tone is extremely similar to that of a school teacher, which makes Shisaka's expression stiff, and almost instantly associated with some not-so-good memories. "Asshole, your tone is really annoying," Shisaka said in a bad tone. "Kurosaki Cheng, don't play tricks on me, just follow me to see Mr. Tsutsuyama." "Mr. Tsutsuyama?" Senju Cheng's face showed some doubts. For that two names of Shisaka and Mr. Tsutsuyama, Senju Cheng could hardly find any relevant impressions in his mind. "Yes, the leader of the execution organization, Mr. Tsutsuyama Hyakiro," Shisaka introduced with a proud tone. Hearing this, Senju Cheng finally reacted. Execution. This name was mentioned twice in the content of the full-bring information recorded by the Tsuneyoshiro family. It is a small organization of full-bringers that has emerged in recent decades. At this moment, when Shishigawa was still a little proud of Kyushu, Synopsis had already stood at the edge of the destroyed gate, blocking the only exit, and hung a sign outside to close early. Just waiting for Senju Cheng to nod slightly, Synopsis was ready to stuff the head of this stupid human into the chrysanthemum. It's just that I don't seem to know Tsutsuma Hyakiro. Is there anything you want to talk to me about? Senju Cheng asked. Of course it's a good thing, Shishigawa said with an expression of showing a favor, making Senju Cheng quickly appreciate him. Mr. Tsutsuma heard that Yuquincy had another direct conflict with the Seireitei, and he couldn't bear to see Yuquincy clan being slaughtered again, so he was prepared to mercifully protect Yuquincy clan. Senju Cheng. As for Senju Cheng, he had almost confirmed the fact, that is, the boy in front of him, Shishigawa, was probably really an arrogant idiot with few thoughts. Well, let's put aside the matter of meeting Tsutsuma Hyakiro for now, and let's talk about the damage you caused to the flower shop and need to compensate for it. How about it? Compensation? Shishigawa said with an unbelievable expression. Hey, you have to understand one thing, now the Kyushu organization is preparing to protect Yuquincy clan, and you actually want to mention compensation? Let's put it one thing at a time, Senju Cheng said, and then snapped his fingers at Synopsis and said, Rem, come here. Then, under the gaze of Shishigawa, who seemed to be beating faster, Synopsis walked to his side and said respectfully, Manager, do you have any instructions? I'll leave the flower shop to you for now, and then talk to Shishigawa about the specific compensation for the damages. I'm going out for a walk. After saying this, Makoto Senju gave Shishigawa a gentle smile, and walked out of the flower shop holding the black cat Yorishi. Yes, manager. Synopsis replied. Then, before Shishigawa wanted to call Makoto Senju, Synopsis gestured to Shishigawa towards the depths of the flower shop with impeccable maid etiquette, and said, Mr. Shishigawa, can you please come with me to a quiet place? In an instant, between the mission and Rem, Shishigawa's eyes turned back and forth, and finally stopped at Synopsis and asked, Hey, do you want to use the honey trap and let me say something nice to Mr. Tsutsuma? Synopsis did not answer, but maintained a standard smile and led Shishigawa to a basement entrance, and walked into the basement of the flower shop obediently. As the passage became darker and narrower, Shishigawa could vaguely smell the girl's fragrance emanating from the Rem doll. His heart was inexplicably moved, his face turned slightly red, and he said, Hey, isn't this progress a little too fast? Something about merging two into one, it's too fast. Don't worry, the manager won't allow me to easily merge humans with me. Synopsis responded. Just when Shishigawa inexplicably felt that there seemed to be something strange about this sentence, but before he could figure it out, Synopsis suddenly stopped. Then, Synopsis slowly turned around and said expressionlessly, However, the manager will allow some physical contact, as long as you don't die. Chapter 506. It's not for free, I refuse. Outside the flower shop, Senju Cheng was strolling leisurely with Kuronko Yorishi in his arms, greeting the neighbors he met from time to time, as if he didn't care about Shishigawa who had just appeared. Kuronko Yorishi seemed to be accustomed to this kind of life habit, just quietly nestling in Senju Cheng's arms, licking his paws and combing his hair from time to time, and suddenly spoke. Hey, Kurosaki Makoto, you also sensed the spiritual pressure of Shishigawa, right? Did Raymond name you and handle it properly? Don't worry, there's no problem with that level. Senju Makoto said disapprovingly, but as for what Rem's specific power was, Senju Makoto didn't intend to tell Kuronko Yorishi. Then, Kuronko Yorishi thought about it and reminded him. We need to pay a little attention to the organization called Kyushu. Huh? Yorishi knows Kyushu? Senju Makoto asked. I occasionally heard Urahara mention some relevant information. The headquarters of this organization seems to be in the neighboring Naruki city. In addition to the fact that the members of the organization are quite powerful, they are also vaguely involved with a criminal that the Seireitei has been chasing for decades. Shuin Yorishi said. What criminal? Senju Makoto asked. Jinjuku. Shuin Yorishi said a name. He is the first generation of Shinigami proxy, with strength far beyond that of ordinary captains, but it seems that due to unknown reasons, Jinjuku has completely broken with the Soul Society. Is that so? Senju Makoto said as if thinking deeply. Now, you have just officially formed an alliance with the Gotti 13, and it is possible that Kusuken has also been recruited and subdued by Aizen Sasuke, so it is not certain that he is testing the probe against you. Of course, although Kuronko Yorishi said this worst possibility, Kuronko Yorishi's tone still revealed a hint of contempt. After all, whether in the eyes of the former four nobles or in the eyes of the Seireitei, the so-called Fullbringers and Kusuken are just extremely insignificant existences. Even in the eyes of the Tsuneshiro family, Fullbringers are just prey that needs to be secretly captured without the knowledge of the Seireitei. However, Senju Cheng knows that he should not be too realistic about Chiwoo Yorishi's speculation. With Aizen Sasuke's arrogance and vision, it is likely that he will not look down on the mere Kusuken. Senju Cheng rubbed his chin and said, "But why did Kusuken target me? And it seems that he thinks that I am in a hostile state with the Seireitei." Chiwoo Yorishi heard this, as if he thought of something, narrowed his eyes and spoke. "How about I help you check it? Free?" Senju Cheng asked. "Of course not." Kuronko Yorishi retorted confidently. "I'm the former captain of the 2nd Division and the commander-in-chief of the secret mobile team. You actually want to get it for free?" However, Kuronko Yorishi obviously underestimated Senju Cheng's face and did not give Kuronko Yorishi the opportunity to make any conditions. "If it's not for free, I refuse." Kuronko Yorishi. "Kurosaki Makoto, you weren't like this before, don't talk to me like I've already gotten it for free," Senju Cheng said, then grabbed Kuronko Yorishi with both hands and held him in front of his eyes. There seemed to be some kind of light flashing in his eyes, and he spoke. "What's more, although you hid your identity as the former captain of the 2nd Division from me in the past, aren't you already like a family member in my eyes? If I give you a reward, it would be an insult to you, wouldn't it?" Kuronko Yorishi's eyes unconsciously widened a little, staring blankly at Senju Cheng who was so close in front of him. A feeling of warmth and trust arose in his heart. In the past, for this man who suddenly appeared in Karakura town, after experiencing the attack and betrayal of Aizen Sasuke, and then being forced to flee from Seireitei, there was no doubt that Kuronko Yorishi had some worries and doubts in his heart. Worried about Senju Cheng, maybe he was also a chess piece secretly planted in Karakura town by Aizen Sasuke. However, in the series of battles in Seireitei, Kuronko Yorishi had undoubtedly been convinced that there was no deeper connection between Kurosaki Makoto and Aizen Sasuke. Except for another more absurd guess, however, at this moment, under the gentle and sincere gaze of Senju Cheng, Kuronko Yorishi, who has always been happy to tease all kinds of innocent boys, subconsciously turned his head slightly and said a little unnaturally, "Even if you say that, I won't let you get away with it for free. I won't go to investigate the situation of Kusuken for free. Even if your Reishi wants to go, I won't allow your Reishi to take risks alone. If your Reishi gets hurt, I'll be very distressed." Senju Cheng said with a smile, and then buried his face in the arms of the black cat Yorishi in public, started to pet the cat. For a moment, perhaps in the eyes of passers-by around, the gentle and handsome Senju Cheng was just a pure cat lover, and there was nothing unusual about petting cats. However, in the feelings of the black cat Yorishi, it was undoubtedly playing a very new thing in public. The extremely stimulating feeling gathered in the nerves, making the black cat Yorishi's eyes seem to be a little white due to excessive excitement, and even the tail was stiff and straight. "No, Urahara. Urahara, I may not be able to go back." It was not until Kuronko Yorishi seemed to have been drained of all his energy and spirit, and he completely collapsed in Senju Cheng's arms, that Senju Cheng held Kuronko Yorishi and hummed a little song, and continued to walk slowly. As for the investigation of Kusuken proposed by Kuronko Yorishi, it was not that Senju Cheng did not have this plan, but there were other candidates. Naruki City, that was undoubtedly the territory of Ishida Raijin and Ishida Rai. With the relationship between Senju Cheng and the Ishida family, this matter could be entrusted to the Ishida family to handle. Perhaps Senju Cheng was not a fan of collecting organs, but according to the information recorded by the Tsuneshiro family, every Fullbringer had a certain degree of Soul King body hidden in his soul. This made it difficult for Senju Cheng, who was essentially a pure doctor, not to be interested in research. However, the current situation is undoubtedly waiting for those patients who have other things stuffed into their bodies to come to the door, which is much more convenient than going to the door for treatment in the past. And when Senju Cheng took Kuronko Yorishi for a stroll, he passed by the residences of Kurosaki Ichigo and Inuyori intentionally or unintentionally, and confirmed that Kusuken had not yet attacked them. After leaving some warning barriers, he returned to the flower shop. P.S. I'm stuck, and there are still only 2 updates. Because before the final battle with Ace and Sasuke in Soul Society, in addition to the Fullbring arc that is planned to end early, there are also some theatrical plots that need to be arranged, and I still need to sort out some details carefully. Regarding this aspect, if book friends have any suggestions, you can also leave a message here, and I will seriously consider and arrange them. That's all. Chapter 507 Cute Smile. After a short stroll, when Makoto Senju returned to the flower shop, Nguyen had already replaced the door with a new one, and the glass shards scattered all over the floor had been cleaned up, as if nothing had happened. Manager, Rem is waiting for you on the 2nd floor. Nguyen said. And Nguyen and Synopsis also called each other Rem and Shadow to avoid unnecessary trouble. Synopsis was to avoid trouble from the Hutomundo side, and Nguyen was to avoid being recognized by the Shinigami of the Seireitei. Then, Makoto Senju held the black cat Yorishi and walked up to the 2nd floor. Rem, who was wearing a maid outfit and looked cute and well behaved, opened the door from the inside at the right time, waiting for Makoto Senju to come in. Inside the room, the arrogant Shishigawa was now hanging in a strange position, as if he was folded in half, with his head pressed against his buttocks. As for Shishigawa's face, it was so swollen that Senju Makoto could hardly recognize it. Suddenly, Kuronko Yorishi could not help but glance at Synopsis, who seemed to be well behaved and harmless, with a little surprise in his eyes. The Rem doll blocked all the spiritual pressure of Synopsis from leaking out, which also made Kuronko Yorishi know that Synopsis was not an ordinary human, but he did not expect Synopsis to hang Shishigawa up in this position so easily. Vice Captain? No, it is very likely that she has the strength of a captain, Kuronko Yorishi secretly judged. Could you be a Quincy clan member too? As Senju Makoto sat down in front of Shishigawa and made a sound, Shishigawa barely opened his swollen eyes and barely recognized Senju Makoto's appearance. He immediately struggled excitedly. In response, Senju Makoto did not let Synopsis tear off the cloth that blocked his mouth, but turned to Synopsis and asked. Did he confess everything he should confess? No, he is very stubborn and refused to say anything. Synopsis replied. For a moment, Shishigawa seemed to struggle more fiercely. Senju Makoto looked at the boy in front of him with some surprise and said admiringly. I didn't expect you to be a stubborn person. Are you acting in accordance with loyalty? After a pause, Senju Makoto stopped touching Kuronko Yorishi's hand and said. Forget it, torturing loyal people is not my way. Synopsis, who was standing aside, frowned slightly and said. Manager, are we just going to let this rude guy go? Instantly, Shishigawa stopped struggling, and a strong light of hope burst out from his eyes that were only a slit left, and Senju Makoto smiled gently and said. Of course we buried him. Otherwise, releasing him like this would only humiliate Shishigawa's loyalty. Shishigawa. At this moment, Shishigawa struggled more violently than ever before, took a few deep breaths, and forced the cloth stuck in his mouth to spit out, shouting. Wait, Senju Makoto seemed a little surprised, then thought of something and said. Do you have any last words or unfinished business? Or do you still have a mother who needs to be taken care of? Don't worry, for your loyalty, I will take her to the flower shop. Shishigawa was stunned for a moment, and instinctively responded to Senju Makoto's kindness. Thank you, no. Shishigawa said quickly. I didn't refuse to answer. Obviously, you didn't say anything. Synopsis stated calmly. But you didn't ask anything at all, what should I say? Shishigawa hurriedly defended. Okay, Senju Makoto waved his hand to stop this meaningless argument, and then said. Then, you should start by introducing yourself. You probably know the information I want. Upon hearing this, Shishigawa's expression twitched for a long time, and then he spoke with difficulty. My name is Shishigawa Mengzao. In an instant, whether it was Senju Makoto, Synopsis or Kuronko Yoichi, they were all stunned. Mengzao. Looking at the bad boy with a punk haircut who looked like a pig in front of him, the next moment, a mixed smile echoed on the 2nd floor of the flower shop, making Shishigawa's face almost flushed. Asshole, I'll kill you if you dare to laugh again. However, before Shishigawa could finish, Synopsis' eyes condensed, and he was so scared that Shishigawa swallowed the second half of his sentence completely. Don't be nervous. We won't laugh at your name or anything like that. Senju Makoto soothed him, and then motioned Shishigawa to continue. Anyway, what I said before was true, Shishigawa said with a red face. Mr. Tsutsuma sent me here to invite you to form an alliance, and you, a bastard, don't know what's good for you. Senju Cheng said with a smile. Your attitude doesn't seem like you're trying to form an alliance. Shisugawara retorted with a smirk. That was also Mr. Tsutsuma's order, because Mr. Tsutsuma knew that the Quincy clan was extremely proud, so he asked me to do this on purpose to suppress the arrogance of the Quincy clan, so as to gain an advantage in the subsequent negotiations. Senju Cheng pondered for a moment, and then shot a spirit arrow with a flick of his finger to put Shisugawara down. Bang! Shisugawara fell heavily to the ground, and after a long while, he reluctantly stood up and said, So, are you going to meet Mr. Tsutsuma with me now? At this moment, Senju Cheng looked at Shisugawara with a little more pity in his eyes and said, I'll give you a piece of advice. It's best not to continue to follow that so-called Mr. Tsutsuma. Shisugawara seemed to be irritated and said angrily, What did you say? However, as Synopsis glanced at Shisugawara immediately deflated completely, and Senju Cheng continued. If Mr. Tsutsuma is a smart man, then this move is to try me with your life, which is extremely despicable. If he is a fool, then there is no value and meaning in following him. Don't waste your life following such a guy. Shisugawara, with a red face, heard the words and gritted his teeth. You are not allowed to insult Mr. Tsutsuma. Senju Cheng saw this and said nothing more, but went downstairs directly with the black cat Yorishi in his arms. Synopsis glanced at Shisugawara with an extremely unfriendly look and warned him. Leave through the window, if you make other places a little dirty. Synopsis did not say the rest of the sentence. His seemingly cute and delicate face revealed a look that could have frightened Lion River. Chapter 508. King's Seal. Inside the flower shop, Senju Cheng watched Shisugawara's spiritual pressure. A stupid boy, he probably didn't even know he was being played with. Senju Cheng sighed. I thought you would leave Shisugawara in the flower shop, waiting for execution to come to you. Kuronko Yorishi said while lazily licking his paw. That Tsutsuma Hyakuma's despicable behavior obviously means that he has already abandoned Shisugawara. There is little point in keeping him. After a pause, Senju Cheng continued. In addition, I left traces of spirit particles on Shisugawara's body that can be sensed by the Quincy. Shisugawara will take right to find the specific location of execution. Aren't you going there in person? Kuronko Yorishi said with some surprise. They are not qualified yet, Senju Cheng said with a smile. What's more, maybe they did all this to lure me out of Karakuracho. On the other side, after leaving the flower shop, Shisugawara carefully circled around Karakuracho several times before heading straight for Naruki City. Then, he circled around Naruki City several more times before stopping at an old apartment that looked dilapidated and abandoned at Chuhara 7 Chome. Enter the elevator, take out the special access control magnetic card, and go straight to the top floor through the elevator. As the elevator opened, what came into view was a very spacious and luxurious space, with a living room, bar, billiard table, etc. Just like a private club. And among them, there were several figures who cast their eyes towards Shisugawara. The twin-tailed girl Doving Liluka wearing a velvet hat, the middle-aged waiter Tozawa Kuriko wearing an eye patch on her right eye, the sturdy dark-skinned woman Jabuki Tristan, the boy who looked like a European nobleman, Yaki Hans Flare Ubarana, and Tsutsuma Hyakuro, who stood in front of Shisugawara, with a gentle and handsome appearance, wearing a shirt and suspenders, and holding a book in his hand. Tsutsuma Hyakuro looked at Shisugawara, who looked embarrassed and bruised, and said calmly, It seems that you failed to invite the guests. Shisugawara bowed and apologized. I'm sorry, Mr. Tsutsuma. Tell me the details. Tsutsuma Hyakuro continued. Yes. Then, Shisugawara described everything that happened in detail. When Shisugawara said that he was released on his own initiative, Jackie interrupted in a deep voice. Are you stupid? You came back like this. Maybe someone has been following you. No, I was very careful along the way and took a long detour, and even walked through a sewer. Shisugawara retorted without hesitation. Tsutsuma Hyakuro said as if he didn't care. It doesn't matter. If that's the case, I'll just invite Mr. Kurosaki Makoto next time in a way that he can't refuse. After a pause, Tsutsuma Hyakuro said to Shisugawara. You've worked hard this time. Go down and rest first. Shisugawara's lips moved slightly when he heard this, but he still didn't speak. He nodded and went down to rest. At this moment, outside the apartment, Seireitei stood on a dense tree branch, hiding his figure, and reached out to push his glasses that reflected the apartment, muttering, "Found it." At the same time, inside the Huko Night Palace, Aiden Sosok flicked through some experimental reports in his hand and spoke to the empty back. "Have you found Ashwa Yunchen?" Then, the figure of Zaraki Futaba was quickly formed under the gathering of spirit particles, and he answered, "For now, no." "Really?" There was a hint of surprise in Aiden Sosok's tone, which made Zaraki Futaba's heart subconsciously tense. How terrifying Aiden Sosok's mind is. Zaraki Futaba is naturally quite clear. Perhaps, Zaraki Futaba is not really cooperating with Aiden Sosok, but it is undeniable that Zaraki Futaba still needs to continue to gain Aiden Sosok's trust. So according to the intention of Senju's map, he can record Aiden Sosok's fusion of the two Hoyoku and all the changes of Aiden Sosok himself, and guide Aiden Sosok when necessary. However, Aiden Sosok did not continue to question or ask, but instead spoke. "Then did anything interesting happen in Huko Mundo?" Zaraki Futaba's eyes moved slightly and spoke. "There is an interesting character." "Oh?" Aiden Sosok turned around and asked with interest. Zaraki Furuya spoke calmly. "Kusaka no Sojiro, a god of death who should have died in the duel with Hitsuge Yatsushiro arranged by the Central 46th Chamber, but his extinct soul was perfectly reborn in Huko Mundo." In an instant, Aiden Sosok stood up as if he was a little out of control. This scene made Zaraki Furuya's expression slightly moved. This was a rare out-of-control performance by Zaraki Furuya in his hundreds of years of observation of Aiden Sosok. The soul that died in Soul Society was resurrected in Huko Mundo. Aiden Sosok's eyes seemed to be shining, and he asked anxiously, "Where is Kusaka no Sojiro now?" Zaraki Furuya pointed in a direction and said, "About 300 miles away in this direction, with the two Aranses who were expelled from the Kainya Palace." Almost as soon as Zaraki Furuya had finished speaking, Aiden Sosok disappeared from the spot, leaving the Kainya Palace, which was the base camp, without hesitation, and went straight to Kusanagi Sojiro's location. At this moment, in a cave 300 miles away from the Kainya Palace, Kusanagi Sojiro was wearing a mask similar to that of a hollow, and a grey cloak, trying to cover up his own spiritual pressure as much as possible to avoid the obvious leakage of the Shinigami's spiritual pressure, thereby attracting attacks from the hollows. In front of Kusanagi Sojiro, two Arensei girls were kneeling on the left and right, reporting to Kusanagi Sojiro the latest information they'd learned from the Kainya Palace. The king of Huko Mundo Aiden Sosok returned to the Kainya Palace. The Shinigami known as Zaraki Furuya was given the status of the king's left hand, and the huge turmoil in the Seireitei had already spread throughout the Kainya Palace. When he heard the last part, Kusanagi Sojiro's eyes sparkled, and he stood up suddenly, laughing wildly. "Aha! We finally waited for this opportunity." The three captains defected, the Central 46 chambers were massacred, and most of the nobles were slaughtered. I'm sure the entire Jingling court is in chaos now. More importantly, it's almost time to move that thing. The royal artifact called Royal Seal. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 509 Another Ice Wheel Pill. The King's Seal. Suddenly, a voice of arrogance with a hint of regret echoed in the cave, and the slender figure of Aiden Sosok appeared at the entrance of the cave, looking down at Kusanagi Sojiro and the two Arensei girls in front of him with a calm and arrogant look. Along with the appearance of Aiden Sosok was the terrifying spiritual pressure that could hardly feel the end, which made Kusanagi Sojiro and the two Arensei girls' bodies almost instinctively frozen in place and unable to move. Kusanagi Sojiro looked at the face in front of him, which had a huge difference in temperament from the one in his memory, but was exactly the same, and said subconsciously, "Aiden Sosok. You still have the energy to call my name, which is commendable." Aiden Sosok's eyes fell on Kusanagi Sojiro, and the terrifying pressure came, causing Kusanagi Sojiro's knees to soften and his body to kneel uncontrollably on the ground. As for the two Arensei girls who were originally following Kusanagi Sojiro, they also knelt down without hesitation, saying with fear and respect, Aiden-sama. Aiden Sosok narrowed his eyes, searched the memory in his mind, and said, "Yin and Yang." Yes. As soon as these words came out, Yin and Yang were excited. However, Aiden Sosok's eyes only stayed for a moment and then moved away. The two Arensei girls named Yin and Yang were just a pair of failures in Aiden Sosok's eyes. Originally, Aiden Sosok planned to refer to the double-bladed zanpakutō of the god of death, and specially selected a pair of rare twin Cheng-ges for the Aaron Saver experiment. Perhaps, Yin and Yang successfully broke the carnage and survived, but their abilities can only be regarded as the middle and lower levels among the Cheng-ge level Aaron Saves, and they are the most common fire and electric abilities respectively, and there is no linkage and coordination between them. Therefore, Yin and Yang are, in a sense, just abandoned items that were expelled from the Huko Palace. Then, Aiden Sosok walked to the original position of Kusanagi Sojiro and sat down, and said, "I'm curious, how did you survive?" Under the huge pressure that Aiden Sosok was emitting all the time, Kusanagi Sojiro's mind was blank, and he answered almost instinctively. "When my soul was about to dissipate from the spirit body, it was accidentally illuminated by the light emitted by the king's seal. When I regained consciousness, I was resurrected in Huko Mundo." Suddenly, Aiden Sosok's eyes narrowed, as if a trace of joy appeared, and the information about the king's seal also emerged in his mind. King's seal. Within the limited range of spiritual pressure, you can have absolute control over the specified time, space and even dimensions within the range. According to rumors, it is a sacred artifact left by the former Soul King. The king's seal in hand means that you have power similar to that of God within a certain range. The storage location of the king's seal has always been the top secret in the Seireitei, and the storage location will be changed every 100 years to ensure safety. So, your soul, which is about to dissipate, has undergone a conceptual change of recovery under the influence of the power of the king's seal, and was transported to the Huko Mundo by the king's seal. When he deduced this, Aiden Sosok couldn't help but reveal a trace of regret in his eyes. The power of the king's seal is theoretically terrifying, but in the case of Kusanagi Sojiro, it is based on the fact that the soul has undoubtedly come into contact with the power of the king's seal, so the missing spirit body has been restored. However, my best friend's only remaining spirit body is stored in the 4th Division's barracks, and if the soul of my best friend can be taken back from the Soul King Palace, why do we need the so-called King's Seal? The Hoyoku in my hand alone is enough to make my best friend return to this era. In an instant, Aiden Sosok lost most of his interest in Kusanagi Sojiro. After all, according to the information recorded by Aiden Sosok in the Great Spiritual Book Corridor, the use of the King's Seal requires a great price. If you want to become a crown, you must bear its weight. The King's Seal is also like this. To truly liberate and use the power of the King's Seal, at least you need to master the Bankai of the God of Death, and once the King's Seal is used, the power of the King's Seal will completely and irreversibly replace the zanpakutō. And the God of Death is not the Soul King. Once the God of Death releases the King's Seal, the consequences will be irreversible. The King's Seal will continue to absorb the spiritual power of the God of Death until the life of the God of Death dies. In addition, once the King's Seal is selected to be liberated in a limited area, the position will not be changed. In other words, the power of the King's Seal is very strong, but it is chicken ribs in a certain sense, otherwise the 4 nobles who have ruled the Soul Society for countless years would have taken the King's Seal for themselves. The owner who can really use the King's Seal at will is only the Soul King. But, the Soul King does not need to use the King's Seal. The other powerful Shinigami who forcibly use the King's Seal for a short period of time will have to pay with their lives. Aiden Sosok lowered his eyes slightly, looked at Kusanagi Sojiro who was kneeling in front of him, and asked, "So, you mean to seize the King's Seal?" "That's right." Kusanagi Sojiro gritted his teeth, his eyes revealing a strong hatred, and said, "No matter what, I can't forgive the Seireitei, I can't forgive what they did to me. I want to seize the King's Seal, and then completely destroy the Seireitei." Then, Kusanagi Sojiro seemed to have thought of something, looked at Aiden Sosok with some hope, and said, "Lord Aiden, you should understand that feeling, right? You should have reached the point where you can no longer tolerate the despicable and shameless behavior of the Seireitei. Let's cooperate. I have been affected by the power of the King's Seal and can roughly sense the location of the King's Seal. So even if the Seireitei changes the location of the King's Seal, I can find the location of the King's Seal. By then, it will be easy to destroy the entire Seireitei through the power of the King's Seal." At the end of the speech, even through the mask on his face, Kusanagi Sojiro's hideous and distorted expression seemed to be somewhat unable to be concealed. Aiden Sosok's eyes moved, and the terrifying spiritual pressure emanating from his body was restrained, and he spoke. "Kusanagi Sojiro, I have some understanding of your past, and I even had the idea of personally going to the Shinen Spiritual Academy to recruit you as my adjutant. You have the same zanpakutō, Horin Mara, as the current captain of the 10th Division, Hitsuge Itrashiro. You are also a genius among geniuses. Chapter 510 Experimental Subject. Instantly, some hope and ecstasy appeared on Kusanagi Sojiro's face. Aizen Sosok. As a god of death struggling to survive in Hukomundo, Kusanagi Sojiro was undoubtedly quite clear about the horror of this man. Unlike himself, who was struggling to survive in Hukomundo, this man ruled the entire Hukomundo as a god of death. Now, after causing extremely serious damage to Soul Society, he led the entire Hukomundo and officially declared war on the Seireitei. Not to mention, when he really faced Aizen Sosok, Kusanagi Sojiro found that he couldn't even stand up. However, Kusanagi Sojiro's smile only lasted for a moment. However, the so-called genius is of no value. In the countless years of history of Soul Society, many geniuses have been redecomposed into spirit particles. Aizen Sosok scratched Kusanagi Sojiro's neck with his finger, bloodstains appeared, and then he stood up, and his slender and arrogant back slowly walked out of the cave. You are not qualified to talk about cooperation with me on an equal footing. Wait until you evolve to a level that I can look you in the face, then come back to see me. Just as Aizen Sosok's figure was completely in Kusanagi Sojiro's sight, Kusanagi Sojiro suddenly felt something and looked down at his hands. The next moment, the blood mark on his neck suddenly burst out with a large amount of hollow matter. Ah! Kusanagi Sojiro let out a shrill scream, and the facial features continued to have hollow matter pouring out. The captain-level spiritual pressure on his body, which originally belonged to the Shinigami, could no longer be suppressed and burst out. However, in the captain-level Shinigami spiritual pressure, the spiritual pressure belonging to the hollows began to mix in. After a long time, when Kusanagi Sojiro walked out of the cave with Yin and Yang, there were 10 Arances of a Cheng-ge half kneeling outside the cave, waiting for Kusanagi Sojiro to appear. Ha ha ha. Seeing this, Kusanagi Sojiro laughed wildly under the mask covering his face, and said, Aizen, I see, but you may be disappointed. I will definitely succeed. Evolve. After I get the King's Seal, I will let you know what the limit of evolution is, and you will not be able to reach me. And far away from the cave, Aizen Sosok and Zaraki Futaba were watching Kusanagi Sojiro from afar. Aizen-kun, do you think Kusanagi Sojiro can successfully seize the King's Seal and destroy the Seireitei? Zaraki Futaba asked. He is far from enough, Aizen Sosok said with a look of disapproval. In theory, he possesses the same strongest ice-type zanpakutō, Hyorin Mara, as Hitsugaya Toshiro, but his own spiritual pressure is already far beyond the captain level, but he hasn't even mastered Bankai, which is enough to explain the problem. His Hyorin Mara is a fake. It is more likely that as a close friend of Hitsugaya Toshiro, through his daily contact with Hitsugaya Toshiro, he inadvertently absorbed some of Hyorin Mara's power and constructed a fake zanpakutō. His zanpakutō has the ability to imitate other zanpakutō, but he firmly believes that it is the real Hyorin Mara, so he has never been able to further master Bankai from beginning to end. A guy who can't even see through a mere fake, even if he really stole the King's Seal that requires Bankai to truly release, how can he really destroy Soul Society? Zaraki Futaro said with a slight flash in his eyes. If that's the case, why did you specifically holloify Kusanagi Sojiro and send him 10 Arances of the level of a Cheng-ge's? It's okay to cause a little more damage and obstruction to Soul Society, not to mention, Aizen Sosok said with a slight smile on his face. I also want to see the true power of the King's Seal, and with the invisible hints I just gave, Kusanagi Sojiro will subconsciously use the power of the King's Seal to continuously evolve within a limited space. An interesting experiment. Maybe there is a possibility of doing something beyond expectations, Aizen Sosok finally commented, then turned around and returned to the direction of the Hunya Palace. As for taking the opportunity to destroy the Seireitei with Kusanagi Sojiro, Aizen Sosok had no intention of doing so from the beginning to the end. The chaos that had been caused in the Seireitei before destroying the Noble Street was already the limit. If the Gotti 13 division was really wiped out, then the 0 division would probably come directly. Before he truly completed the Hojoku and was ready to ascend the Soul King Palace to face the 0 division, Aizen Sosok had no intention of destroying the Seireitei. Come to think of it, Makoto-kun seems to like the Seireitei quite a bit. It's really difficult to prevent the Seireitei from being destroyed while completely destroying the Gotti 13 under the seemingly eternal night of Hukomundo. Aizen Sosok's arrogant and cold eyes unconsciously slowly looked up at the night sky of Hukomundo. When Makoto-kun's consciousness finally faded, his eyes should have reflected the same night sky. It's so lonely and boring, just bear with it for a little longer, Makoto-kun. Suddenly, Aizen Sosok spoke again to the empty surroundings and said something. Zaraka-kun, speed up the search for Rashua Insei a little bit. He is an indispensable weapon. I know, appeared in the world. Makoto Senju held the black cat Yorishi in his arms and sat on the roof of the flower shop, looking at the starry night sky, enjoying this comfortable and leisurely time under the beautiful starry sky. Of course, although Makoto Senju held the black cat Yorishi in his arms, he could not help but think of Unohana Retsu, and recalled the days when he and Unohana teacher often drank tea and admired the moon in the courtyard. However, the starry sky in the real world is much more beautiful than that in Soul Society. Makoto Senju sighed. Meow. Then, Ichigo Kurosaki, who had transformed into a Shinigami, appeared behind Makoto Senju with a flash step, and spoke respectfully. Uncle Kurosaki. You are late, Ichigo. Makoto Senju responded, then turned his head to look at Ichigo Kurosaki, and his keen observation almost instantly distinguished that Ichigo Kurosaki's mood seemed not right. His slightly furrowed brows seemed to be trying to hide something, but Ichigo Kurosaki's immature acting skills in hiding his inner thoughts were almost full of flaws in the eyes of a veteran actor like Makoto Senju. Did something happen? Makoto Senju asked. Nothing. Ichigo Kurosaki shook his head and replied. Chapter 511. The Missing Chagtatora. Upon hearing this, Makoto Senju stood up and walked in front of Ichigo Kurosaki, speaking in a gentle tone. Ichigo, you can be said to have grown up under my watch. I can tell what you think, and you don't have to worry about your troubles causing me trouble. Sorry, Uncle Kurosaki. Ichigo Kurosaki said subconsciously, hesitated for a moment, and then spoke. It seems that Chad is missing. Makoto Senju thought for a moment and spoke. Chad? Chagtatora? Yes. How long has he been missing? Makoto Senju asked. Ichigo Kurosaki spoke worriedly. More than 3 days. I turned into a Shinigami today and searched around Karakura town, but I couldn't find any trace of Chad. For a boy like Ichigo Kurosaki, who is not very good at expressing emotions, but is actually passionate and very enthusiastic towards his family and friends, Chagtatora's disappearance makes him quite worried. Of course, what Ichigo Kurosaki is most worried about is whether Chagtatora was attacked by a hollow and swallowed by it. Although Chagtatora's body is almost a monster's physique for an ordinary human, it is obviously not enough in front of a hollow. In Makoto Senju's impression, apart from Chagtatora's relatively low presence in his previous life, Chagtatora was also a relatively taciturn classmate who would silently care about others. However, because Makoto Senju slightly changed the timeline, Chagtatora did not awaken his full-bring ability to protect others as in the original trajectory. In addition, Makoto Senju did not pay special attention to Chagtatora, nor did he deliberately guide his abilities, so Chagtatora should still be an ordinary human now. I know about Chad-san, Makoto Senju nodded and said. But since you can't find it after searching alone, I'll take you to a place. If those guys help to find it, the efficiency will be much higher, and that's also the most suitable place for you to practice hollowification. Yes, Uncle Kurosaki. Kurosaki Ichigo did not refute Senju Makoto, and followed Senju Makoto to the direction of a corner of Karakura town. Soon, when Senju Makoto stopped, there was a huge abandoned warehouse in front of him. Uncle Kurosaki, where is this? Kurosaki Ichigo asked. Senju Makoto touched the black cat Yorishi in his arms and said. They are the bases of the masked core you saw in Soul Society in the real world. After a pause, Senju Makoto continued. If you don't want to lose control of yourself due to the hollow in your body like before in Soul Society, then you need to learn how to suppress and control the hollow in your body. Kurosaki Ichigo hesitated and said puzzledly. Uncle Kurosaki, the Yamadasana is you can remove the hollow in his body, can't I do that? Senju Makoto thought for a while and answered. Ichigo, don't reject the hollows. From the perspective of the Quincy, hollows and Shinigami are just a form of human souls. Although hollows are natural enemies of humans, their essence is the same. As soon as these words came out, Ichigo Kurosaki, who was originally quite naive, couldn't help but fall into deep thought. Ichigo, don't forget that you are a human being, and your mother is a Quincy. Senju Makoto continued. So from the perspective of the Quincy, I hope you try to understand and coexist peacefully with the hollow in your body. Pa pa pa. At this moment, a round of applause rang out. The air outside the seemingly old warehouse was covered with rainbow ripples, and a group of masked core members led by Hirako Makoto appeared in front of Senju Makoto and Ichigo Kurosaki. What a unique and profound speech, worthy of Mr. Kurosaki Makoto. Hirako Makoto said admiringly. However, just as Mako Hirako finished speaking, Hiri Seireitei, who was standing behind Mako Hirako, picked up her slips and slapped Mako Hirako's butt. Ah! In an instant, Mako Hirako, who seemed to be quite dignified, jumped up in pain. Asshole Hiri, what are you doing? Mako Hirako turned her head and questioned Hiri Seireitei. Too disgusting, bald guy. Hiri Seireitei turned her head and said with disgust. Even if Kurosaki Makoto is very strong, you guys are so disgusting that you kneel down and lick me as soon as you meet me. Mako Hirako heard that several blue veins on his face were obviously popping out, and he roared. Asshole, I must teach you a lesson today. In an instant, the other members of the masked corps who gathered here hurriedly separated Mako Hirako and Hiri Seireitei. This scene also made Ichigo Kurosaki look stunned. Makoto Senju couldn't help but sigh when he saw this. What a good relationship. Without the constraints of the rules and regulations of the Seireitei, the internal relationship of the masked corps is actually much more harmonious and friendly than the relationship between them 100 years ago. As for Kuroko Yorishi, she continued to lick her paws occasionally and comb her beautiful hair. Meow. You guys are almost done with the trouble, right? Let's get down to business. I have to go home and sleep with Kurosaki Makoto. In an instant, the scene suddenly became quiet, and the members of the masked corps all stared at Kuroko Yorishi and Senju Makoto's arms. Business? Go home and sleep with Kurosaki Makoto? At this moment, Kuroko Yorishi's speech almost overloaded the collective CPU of the masked corps. Among them, fangirls like Ado Marilisa have already associated a lot of pictures. Not only their faces have become completely rosy, but even their eyes have become a little more blurred. After Kuroko Yorishi finished speaking, he also realized that he seemed to have accidentally said the wrong thing. The gradually sharpening cat pupils made the members of the masked corps suddenly shudder, and their frivolous expressions quickly became serious. Ha ha ha, Mr. Kurosaki Makoto, please come in, please come in. Hirako Makoto, who was the first to react, immediately greeted Senju Makoto enthusiastically, as if nothing had happened just now. Senju Makoto also smiled a little unnaturally, and walked into the base with Kurosaki Ichigo. Then, facing the friends of the masked corps who were all on the united front against Aizen Sasuke, Senju Makoto did not beat around the bush and directly stated the need for them to help train Kurosaki Ichigo to master the holoization. In this regard, the members of the masked corps had almost no position or reason to refuse. Not to mention that after Kurosaki Ichigo mastered the holoization, he could also increase his strength to fight against Aizen Sasuke, and more importantly, Kuroko Yorishi, the big money sponsor, was still lying in Senju Makoto's arms. The masked army, in the final analysis, they are just a bunch of poor bastards, even including Urahara Kisuke. They are all supported by the big money sponsor Kuroko Yorishi. Chapter 512. Eating a soft rice. No problem. Mako Hirako glanced at Ichigo Kurosaki and simply agreed. By the way, there is one more thing. Makoto Senju paused and continued. One of my students, Yasutaro Chidori, has disappeared. I hope you can help find his whereabouts. This, Mako Hirako heard this and looked around at the other members of the masked corps in some embarrassment. Although Mako Hirako is the nominal leader of the masked corps, in fact, the other members just think it's troublesome to deal with things, so they pushed everything to Mako Hirako. In fact, for a loose organization like the masked corps, Mako Hirako's orders may not be easy to use. Especially in the corps, there are 70-pound guys like Hiri Seireitei and 69-pound guys who were rebellious and making trouble. At this time, Kuroko Yorishi spoke. You can move around and check if there are any Yaranses lurking in Karakura town. However, soon after Kuroko Yorishi finished speaking, Senju Makoto's palm covered Kuroko Yorishi's head and rubbed Kuroko Yorishi's head fiercely. Meow. Why are you interrupting a human being? Senju Makoto said with pretended dissatisfaction. I'm just helping out and making my position clear so as not to waste time. Kuroko Yorishi replied. Stay still, or I won't take you out next time. Senju Makoto finished speaking and gently tapped Kuroko Yorishi's head, as if to teach Kuroko Yorishi a lesson, looking at the surrounding masked army members who were almost stunned. This is Sunshine Yorishi, the former head of the Shoin family. One of the representatives of the two oldest families left in Seoul society, the Kachika family and the Shoin family, when the Shiba family declined and the Tsuneshiro family was almost completely wiped out. In a sense, Shifen Yuan Yorishi is definitely the most noble female in the human world, Soul Society, and Huko Mundo. Marrying Shifen Yuan Yorishi means a step to heaven. However, that Shifen Yuan Yorishi was actually taught and beaten like this. What made the masked corps even more stunned was that Kuronko Yorishi did not show any dissatisfaction, just lying quietly in Senju Makoto's arms and dared not say a word. "So, can you help me a little?" Senju Makoto said sincerely. Yes, Hirako Makoto stammered in response, and the other members of the masked corps did not dare to object at all. There is no doubt that Hirako Makoto and others can almost be sure that if they can show their teeth to Senju Makoto, it is very likely that the Shifen Yuan family will no longer provide financial subsidies to the masked corps in the future. What comic books, small Fanta books, game consoles, food, etc. that are unique to the human world, unless the masked corps changes their careers to become bandits and thieves, they will all be far away from them. Then I'll leave everything about Ichigo and Chagtateru in your hands. Senju Makoto bowed slightly to express his gratitude, and then left the abandoned warehouse as the masked corps collectively stood up to bid farewell. Seeing Senju Makoto's back disappearing in the blink of an eye using the Hylian Q, the masked corps members almost collectively watched in silence, as if they were all thinking about something. "I'm so envious," Fenj Kaluja sighed. "It's hard to imagine that Shifen Yuan Yorishi would have such a well-behaved and obedient side." Kuninbai said. "Is this what it means to eat soft rice? How did Mr. Kurosaki Makoto do it?" Road Guru Makensei also expressed a tone of envy. "Illusions, maybe they are all illusions," Hirako Makoto said with gritted teeth. Yido Marilisa spoke bluntly. "If you also have the strength to match the Captain General, and that handsome appearance, you may be able to do it." As soon as these words came out, the masked corps members immediately felt much more balanced in their hearts. After all, although Kurosaki Makoto is a queency, he has been fighting against Captain General Yamamoto in the Seireitei for a long time without being defeated, and he has also resisted the Hollow Flash Torrent with his own strength, which gave them the opportunity to surround the Hollow group. Such strength is indeed impressive. At this time, Seireitei seemed to have thought of something and spoke. "By the way, that guy Reihara Kisuke." In an instant, in the puzzled eyes of Kurosaki Ichigo, the expressions of the masked corps members became particularly strange and exciting. Suddenly, Hirako Mako realized something, turned to look at Kurosaki Ichigo and spoke. "Speaking of which, the last time Ichigo broke into the Seireitei was simply to save Kachika Rukia, right?" "Yes," Kurosaki Ichigo replied. Hirako Mako bared his teeth and spoke viciously. "You guys with the last name Kurosaki are really amazing." For a moment, the other members of the masked corps realized what Hirako Mako wanted to express. Shifen Yuan Yorishi was completely eaten up by Kurosaki Makoto, so would Kachika Rukia, the only other noble family left in the Seireitei, also be eaten up by Kurosaki Ichigo? In this way, will the entire Seireitei have to be named Kurosaki in the future? Thinking of this, the members of the masked corps present couldn't help but feel a little sour in their hearts. "Ichigo, come on, let's start training." "Yes, I can't wait, you have to work hard, Ichigo." For a moment, the members of the masked corps almost unanimously surrounded Kurosaki Ichigo, and their smiling faces were full of sourness. And at this moment, the captain's meeting was also being held in the Seireitei. As Yamamoto Seireitei Shibukuni deliberately suppressed the nobles and delayed their requests to reorganize the central 46 chambers, the captain's meeting undoubtedly became the highest decision-making model in the entire Soul Society. Especially when the GOTY 13 began to integrate the resources of the Soul Society, the captain's meetings were held almost frequently, and each captain had to share a large number of tasks. Standing in a high position, looking like a kind and intimidating old man, Yamamoto Seireitei Shibukuni announced the agenda of this meeting. "Everyone, the time for the scheduled change of storage location of the King's Seal is approaching, and this matter must be handled with extreme caution." Then, Yamamoto Seireitei Shibukuni gave the other captains some time to digest the news, and then continued. "According to past practice, the transfer of the King's Seal will be the responsibility of the 2nd Division for large-scale security, and the 6th Division, 8th Division, and 10th Division will each escort a team to transfer." Bang! Yamamoto Seireitei Shibukuni opened his squinting eyes a little and reminded them sternly. "Although the Royal Seal will actually be hidden in one of the 3 teams, we must not let down our guard. Each team must prepare a foolproof escort plan, and the captain must always be on guard. Chapter 513 The same zanpakutō. Soon, the transfer of the King's Seal officially began. However, since the captain positions of 3 of the current GOTY 13 squads are temporarily taken over by the vice-captains, it is difficult to take on the heavy responsibility. Therefore, in the case of a shortage of manpower in the GOTY 13, it is already the limit to transfer the 2nd, 6th, 8th and 10th squads to be responsible for the transfer of the King's Seal. In addition, in order to ensure that the location of the King's Seal is secret enough, the transfer team of the King's Seal will also travel between the Soul Society and the real world, and finally store it somewhere in the Soul Society or the real world. In the real world, the King's Seal transfer team guarded by the 10th squad, almost all of the 10th squad were deployed around the transfer team for vigilance. However, unlike the secret transfer that Matsumoto Rangiku expected, the transfer team formed according to convention was quite large and solemn. On the huge cloud layer constructed with unique instruments, the transfer team used various ritual utensils that seemed to be used for offering sacrifices to the sky, which meant that the royal family was traveling to inspect the territory. Rangiku Matsumoto watched the transfer team moving slowly forward from a distance, and couldn't help but complain. Is it really appropriate to make such a big fuss? Shouldn't the transfer of an important royal artifact like the King's Seal be as secret as possible? Hitsuge Yatsuro, who was standing in front of Rangiku Matsumoto, crossed his arms and, except for a bandage on his forehead, he could hardly see the serious injuries he had suffered at the double-killing hill not long ago. Hitsuge Yatsuro glanced at Rangiku Matsumoto, and with his habitual slightly wrinkled eyebrows, he said in a pretentious manner, "Authority needs to be decorated with rituals. Especially since Aizen Sosak's rebellion caused a large number of nobles to be killed, this kind of ritual is even more necessary to show respect for the royal family and the GOTY 13's belief in victory in the next war." Rangiku Matsumoto stuck out her tongue as if she understood and said, "So-called politics is really complicated. In short, stop talking so much nonsense, stay alert, and the King's Seal must not be lost." Hitsuge Yatsuro scolded in a low voice. Yes, my noble Captain Matsumoto Rangiku said with a full of sarcasm, and before Hitsuge Yatsuro could get angry, the whole person instantly disappeared from the spot to check the defense work. Hitsuge Yatsuro snorted coldly with gritted teeth, and ignored Matsumoto Rangiku, but looked around with a serious look. Inexplicably, Hitsuge Yatsuro had a feeling that something was about to happen. And at this moment, above the transfer team, a lightning bolt that was constantly spinning violently appeared out of thin air and exploded in the center of the transfer team, and several powerful fireballs exploded. Boom! In an instant, amid a series of chaotic screams, the entire transfer team was in chaos. Enemy attack. This scene made Hitsuge Yatsuro not have time to think about how the enemy got through the layers of cordons set up by the 10th Division. After shouting instinctively, he quickly approached the center of the transfer team, first confirming the safety of the King's Seal that might exist. However, when Hitsuge Yatsuro broke through the layers of smoke and entered the smoke, one of the 2 figures that came into view made Hitsuge Yatsuro subconsciously widen his eyes. That outline, that familiar back, Hitsuge Yatsuro was almost subconsciously stunned on the spot, and then he lost his composure and asked anxiously, "Who are you?" Through the mask on his face, Kusanagi Sojiro looked at the friend in front of him who had once been in the Shinigami Spiritual Academy, and said with nostalgia and joy in his heart, "Shiro, long time no see. This familiar name, this familiar tone, you, impossible. Are you kidding me?" At this moment, under the huge impact of a certain possibility in his heart, Hitsuge Yatsuro even forgot the existence of the King's Seal and instinctively rushed towards Kusanagi Sojiro and shouted, "Take off the mask." However, under Hitsuge Yatsuro's extremely shocked eyes, Kusanagi Sojiro pulled out another identical Horin mirror. Ding ding ding, the short fight made Hitsuge Yatsuro feel as if he had returned to the Mao Spiritual Academy decades ago. As the 2 Horin mirror intersected and stalemated, Hitsuge Yatsuro stared at the man with his face hidden in front of him and spoke. "You are, no mistake." However, at this moment, another figure completely covered by a cloak standing beside Kusanagi Sojiro made a gentle voice. "It's time to leave. Otherwise, if we are held back by the 10th Division, the support from the 2nd Division will arrive soon." Just at this time, Matsumoto Rangiku had led a large number of the 10th Division Shinigami to surround them. The Aransei and Yang, who were originally responsible for blocking the other 10th Division Shinigami, retreated to the side of Kusanagi Sojiro. Matsumoto Rangiku, who rushed to the battlefield, glanced from a distance and realized that the situation was extremely bad. The sedan chair that was originally responsible for the existence of the King's Seal had been destroyed, and the King's Seal might have fallen into the hands of the attackers. Seeing this, the mysterious figure spoke. "Let me delay for a while and cover the rear." Matsumoto Rangiku, who was about to give the order to attack, was suddenly startled, her beautiful eyes widened, and she murmured this voice. The next moment, under Matsumoto Rangiku's incredible gaze, the mysterious figure pulled out a familiar zanpakutō from his waist. Matsumoto Rangiku witnessed this scene, and the whole person even subconsciously took a few steps back. "No, impossible." The officers of the 10th Division beside Rangiku Matsumoto asked hurriedly, looking at the extremely out-of-control Rangiku Matsumoto. "What's wrong?" "Vice Captain." Before Rangiku Matsumoto could speak, the mysterious figure whispered the words of liberation in a gentle voice. "Show it, arrive, transcend it, the ultimate of all things, the root of everything. All things in the universe." As the voice fell, with the mysterious figure as the center, this environment should have been above the high-altitude clouds, but on the surface of the clouds, large patches of green grass suddenly appeared. "It's really zanpakutō. All things in the universe." Rangiku Matsumoto squeezed out such a sentence from her teeth, her eyes fixed on the mysterious figure. The next moment, Rangiku Matsumoto suddenly rushed towards the mysterious figure, roaring and shouting out of control. "Unforgivable, unforgivable. You are definitely not that adult, take off your cloak." "Humor, Grey Cat." However, before Matsumoto Rangiku could rush to the mysterious figure, the green grass spreading above the clouds suddenly turned into giant trees that blocked Matsumoto Rangiku's way. Chapter 514. The possibility of being a Senju Makatao. "Goodbye, Rangiku," a gentle voice came from behind that giant tree. When Rangiku Matsumoto and other members of the 10th Division used ghost arts to destroy the giant trees that blocked their way, the central area was still empty. The two mysterious people who covered their faces with masks and cloaks, the two hollow girls who assisted in the attack, and Hitsuge Ayashiro all disappeared completely. A moment later, with the King's Seal being robbed, the news of the disappearance of Hitsuge Ayashiro, the captain of the 10th Division, was reported back to the Seireitei, and the captain's meeting was held urgently. Under the gaze of many captains, Rangiku Matsumoto, the vice captain, knelt on one knee in the conference room. As for Yamamoto Shinigami Shibukuni, who was standing at the top, the seemingly old figure exuded a pressure that made many captains feel depressed. As the door of the captain's conference room closed, Yamamoto Shinigami Shibukuni gave an order. "Vice Captain Matsumoto, please describe everything in detail." "Yes." Rangiku Matsumoto, who seemed to be in a trance, responded a little slowly, and then described what she knew from an objective perspective. In fact, there was no possibility that Rangiku Matsumoto could hide anything. The entire transfer team at the 10th Division witnessed almost everything that happened. Even if Rangiku Matsumoto lied, it would be meaningless. It was fine in the first half of the statement, but when it came to the mysterious existence hiding its figure in a cloak, Rangiku Matsumoto's voice paused and she was reluctant to speak. This abnormal reaction also made Yamamoto Shinigami Shibukuni's face darken. Bang! A dull sound of a cane hitting the floor sounded, and the other captains looked at Rangiku Matsumoto with a little more suspicion. "Vice Captain Matsumoto, are you trying to hide something by reacting like this?" "Sorry." Rangiku Matsumoto gritted her teeth and spoke slowly. "Another attacker has unleashed his zanpakutō, Senromansu." As soon as these words came out, the captains present were all shocked, and even Yamamoto Shinigami Shibukuni subconsciously opened his slightly squinting eyes. Zanpakutō Senromansu. Almost all the captains present knew about this zanpakutō. In the past, Senromansu was judged to have a large-scale super-healing ability, but in the hands of the man who was not the captain, this zanpakutō eventually developed incredible and terrifying offensive and defensive capabilities. With his own strength, he resisted thousands of uchikes and protected the expeditionary corps. In a sense, the man who had passed away could be called a legend even in the Seireitei. Even though decades had passed, countless Shinigami still admired and missed that man. "Shut up. How can you slander my best friend like this?" Kachikabyokaya subconsciously scolded. "You need to be responsible for saying such things." Yuna Hanaretsu also shouted sternly. "Are you sure, Vice Captain Matsumoto? Could it be an illusion caused by the effect of Aizen's zanpakutō?" For a moment, Matsumoto Rangiku's words stirred up 1,000 waves in the captain's meeting room, and captains couldn't help but question it one after another. Matsumoto Rangiku, who was kneeling on one knee in the captain's meeting room, gritted her teeth tightly, and naturally couldn't believe the scene in her heart. She was horrified and angry, but also had a glimmer of hope. That man, could it really be Master Senju? Obviously, Matsumoto Rangiku knew that such a thing was impossible, and even if Master Senju was still alive, he would never do anything that was detrimental to the Seireitei. But, if it was really Master Senju, how great would it be? After a moment, Matsumoto Rangiku faced the questioning and answered. Besides me, Captain Seireitei, who arrived in time later, also witnessed the strange phenomenon formed after the release of the All-Seeing. After this, the other captains realized that Seireitei seemed to have kept her head down from beginning to end, and did not make a sound in the meeting. Captain Seireitei, did you also see it with your own eyes? Komamura Sejin asked. Seireitei slowly raised her head and spoke with bloodshot eyes. Yes, that is the scene that can only be formed after the All-Seeing is released. In an instant, the entire captain's meeting room fell into silence. It doesn't sound good, Kakushansui said, stroking his chin. Let's not talk about Captain Hitsugei's inexplicable disappearance. How did the attacker accurately grasp the specific location of the King's Seal? Just the appearance of the All-Seeing is a big problem. The zanpakutō named All-Seeing, if it is in the hands of that man, it can exert the power to destroy the Seireitei. After this, the captain's expressions undoubtedly became more heavy and complicated. In the long history of Soul Society, Raijin Jaka and Horinmaru were recognized as the strongest zanpakutō of the fire and ice types, respectively. And Shinraman may have only shown healing abilities at the beginning, but now it is the strongest wood-type zanpakutō in the minds of many Shinigami. Then, Kakushansui turned his head to look at Unohana Retsu and said, Captain Unohana, the body of Vice Captain Senju should still be preserved in the 4th Division barracks, right? Unohana Retsu raised his gently narrowed eyes and asked back. What do you mean? No. Kakushansui felt empty in his heart and explained quickly. Just confirming, after all, the strength of Shinraman is more derived from Vice Captain Senju's own talents. There is no doubt that praising Senju Makoto is definitely more effective than praising Unohana Retsu himself. Don't worry, I can be sure that the person is definitely not Makoto. Unohana Retsu replied softly. Unohana Retsu undoubtedly answered this point with a lot of certainty. If that's the case, then the situation may not be as serious as imagined, Kakushansui said with a smile. At least, our enemy will not be Vice Captain Senju, who once resisted thousands of Uchukas by himself, but the bad news is that someone stole Vice Captain Senju's zanpakutō. Of course, although Kakushansui said this verbally, his eyes still showed suspicion from time to time when he looked at Unohana Retsu. Zanpakutō is a unique ability reflected in the heart of the god of death. In common sense, just as there are no two identical leaves in the world, there should not be two completely identical zanpakutō in the world. Bang! Yamamoto Jinrai Shichikuni knocked on his cane and said, The King's Seal was stolen. This is a major incident that cannot be tolerated. P.S. The third update will be a little later. Chapter 515 Emergency Order. Next, the GOTY 13th Division will prioritize retrieving the Royal Seal, confirming the identity of the attacker, and searching for the missing Captain Hitsugei. Because the situation is unusual, there may be traitors within the 10th Division, so all members of the 10th Division are ordered not to leave the squad room until the Royal Seal is retrieved. The above order is the Emergency Special Order. As soon as these words came out, the captains present also understood the seriousness of the situation. Emergency Special Order was serious enough to mobilize the entire GOTY 13th Division, and allow the captains to perform Bankai in the Seireitei if necessary without being held accountable. Wait a minute, as Yamamoto Jinrai Shichikuni's order came out, Matsumoto Rangiku couldn't help but show a shocked and unacceptable expression, and stood up subconsciously. Does Vice Captain Matsumoto have any objections? Yamamoto Jinrai Shichikuni asked. The majesty that had accumulated for thousands of years was almost like a mountain pressing down on the little Vice Captain Matsumoto Rangiku, but Matsumoto Rangiku gritted his teeth and spoke. The captain is missing. How can I, as the Vice Captain, stay in the squad room and wait for news? And I have reasons to personally confirm the master of Senbon Bancho. That's why we're not allowed to act on your own. This is an order. Yamamoto Jinrai Shichikuni said without question, then announced the end of the meeting and left the meeting room. Seeing this, the other captains also quickly took action, especially Kakushansui, who was mumbling helplessly. It's really embarrassing. Unexpected things happen again and again. Soon, the huge meeting room was almost empty. Matsumoto Rangiku stood alone in the middle, but felt helpless. There is no doubt that the vice captain did not even have the right to participate in the meeting. Matsumoto Rangiku was brought here to be questioned. How could she oppose the decision of the captain-in-chief? However, just as Chojiro Suzuki, who was in charge of the execution of the 1st Division, entered the meeting room and prepared to take Rangiku Matsumoto back to the 10th Division's barracks, the gentle and elegant figure of Retsu Unohana stood between them. "Captain Unohana, what are you doing?" Chojiro Suzuki asked respectfully. "Vice Captain Suzuki, can I have a few words with Vice Captain Matsumoto first?" Retsu Unohana asked. "Of course, Captain Unohana, please do as you please." Chojiro Suzuki nodded and stood aside, waiting. Rangiku Matsumoto looked at Retsu Unohana with some confusion when she saw this. "Rangiku," Retsu Unohana gently reached out to smooth the hair scattered on Rangiku Matsumoto's face and spoke. "You are the child that Makoto brought back from Rukongai, and you were also that child that Makoto and I have watched grow up little by little." When mentioning the name, Rangiku Matsumoto could no longer stop the tears in her eyes, and said while biting her lower lip, "Unohana-sama, do you think that person is Senju-sama?" "Of course not." Unohana Retsu's gentle voice constantly soothed Rangiku Matsumoto's heart, and she spoke. "However, no matter who knows that the zanpakutō is Shinigami, they will have doubts and worries. That is why Captain Yamamoto will not allow you to participate in the search and tracking mission." "Why?" Rangiku Matsumoto asked. "If the person is really Makoto, what will you choose? Draw your sword against him, or follow him out of Soul Society?" When saying this, Unohana Retsu's squinting eyes slightly widened, taking in all the changes in Rangiku Matsumoto's expression. That is, struggle, confusion and pain. I. Rangiku Matsumoto's mind was almost in a mess, and the figure of Makoto Senju kept surging in her mind. For Rangiku Matsumoto, Jin Ichimura is the most cherished childhood sweetheart, and Makoto Senju is almost the respected person who gave Rangiku Matsumoto redemption. Not only did he save her life, but he also brought her from the chaotic and disorderly Rukongai to the Seireitei, allowing Matsumoto Rangiku to enjoy a wonderful life that she had never experienced before. Like a father and a brother. Unohana Retsu glanced at the head of the sparrow Chojiro behind him, and before Matsumoto Rangiku could answer, he continued. "Therefore, in addition to worrying that there was a traitor hidden in the 10th Division, Captain Yamamoto also wanted to avoid embarrassing you." "Yes." Matsumoto Rangiku replied somewhat unwillingly and confusedly. Unohana Retsu saw this, smiled and patted Matsumoto Rangiku on the shoulder, and said, "Don't worry, go back to the 10th Division barracks and stay well, nothing will happen." Then, Unohana Retsu left the captain's meeting room and returned to the direction of the 4th Division barracks. Unohana Retsu understood, the Gotti 13th Division might be entering an extremely sensitive period next. Aiden Sasuke's rebellion was ahead, and they could start a war against the Seireitei at any time. Under such circumstances, Yamamoto Shinigami Shibukuni would never allow the emergence of the next Aizen Sasuke, but Senju Makoto, who once had great prestige in the Seireitei, undoubtedly has this possibility. In the past, Senju Makoto not only had considerable prestige among his peers, but also as an extremely admired existence in the eyes of many younger Shinigami who have now served as vice captains and chief officers. Therefore, the Gotti 13th Division not only needs to search for the whereabouts of the King's Seal with all its strength and confirm the identity of the attacker, but also needs to be on guard against possible chaos within the Gotti 13th Division. When Unohana Retsu returned to the 4th Division to announce the content of the emergency special order, when Okiriza and Kotetsu, who were present, knew about the appearance of Shinigami, there was almost a surge of public sentiment. Obviously, as the 4th Division, except for providing medical assistance when necessary, they stayed in the safest area and did not need to go to the front line in other cases. However, led by Okiriza and Kotetsu, many chief officers kept asking to go to the front line to assist in the search mission. Even Yamamoto Hanatame, who was usually the most timid and cowardly, raised his hand weakly. This scene made Unohana Retsu feel a headache. How many marks did that bastard Makoto leave in the 4th Division? Whose division is this? I'm obviously the captain. Unohana Retsu shook his head helplessly, and then rejected the requests of the officers one by one. And this is undoubtedly just a microcosm of the 13th Division of the Gotti. In the past, because Senju Cheng knew that those Shinigami had potential in the future, he occasionally showed favors and made friends with them. This undoubtedly left a huge influence on many vice captains, officers and other core Shinigami in the entire Seireitei. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 516. The barrier that appeared in the suburbs just when the loss of the King's Seal and the fact that the zanpakutō used by the attacker was Shinigami caused a turmoil in the Seireitei. In the present world, Karakura Town. Makoto Senju made a rough plan for Ichigo Kuroseiki's next training, temporarily handing Ichigo Kuroseki over to the masked corps to guide Ichigo Kuroseki to initially control the power of Hollow. Then, when Makoto Senju was preparing to deal with the problem of execution, what surprised Makoto Senju was that for several days, execution had no reaction at all, as if the previous temptation of Shishigawa was just an illusion. And that's all. Except for Shishigawa, who occasionally went out to purchase supplies, all the members of execution basically did not leave the apartment. Ishidori reported to Makoto Senju the intelligence he had monitored in that past few days. It's a bit strange. Are they waiting for something? Makoto Senju said in confusion. Perhaps, they are aware of the huge gap between them and Uncle Kuroseki, so they dare not make any reaction? Ishidori guessed. Senju Makoto didn't say anything, but stood up and walked to the window, with several guesses in his mind. Now, Shishigawa is more like a bait. With the help of Shishigawa, who seems to be straightforward and brainless, he told me about the existence of execution, and then they all huddled in the base camp and did not move. What does this mean? Do you really think that I can't find their location? Or are they using this mysterious way to lure me out of Karakura Town? Or do you think that you will be able to ask them for help at some point? Senju Makoto stroked his chin, his eyes moved slightly, and he looked in the direction of the outskirts of Karakura Town. And Ishidori, who was originally following Senju Makoto, also looked in the same direction and said, "The area in the suburbs seems to be closed by a large-scale ghost barrier. Is there something wrong? Go and have a look." Senju Makoto reminded. Yes, Ishidori nodded, and his figure quickly rushed towards the outskirts of Karakura Town. As for Senju Makoto, he had no intention of moving. He continued to stay in the flower shop peacefully, and even went downstairs to drink tea and play with cats at a leisurely pace. For that current Seireitei, Aizen Sosak's goal has almost been guessed by half, that is, the Soul King Palace. However, in order to enter the Soul King Palace through normal means, one needs a key called the King's Key, and Karakura Town, as a heavy spiritual land, is a necessity for the creation of the King's Key. Therefore, when it is determined that Karakura Town, as a heavy spiritual land, will be the main battlefield in the future, compared to those small things that seem to emerge in an endless dream, Senju Makoto needs to pay more attention to not being accidentally banned in advance by Aizen Sosak. After all, with Aizen Sosak's IQ and the ability of the collapsing jade, it is possible that he will specially prepare a big gift for himself. Only Aizen Sosak, Senju Makoto will never underestimate him. Even though Senju Makoto has planted chess pieces one after another around Aizen Sosak, he still won't look down on him. While Ishidori quickly rushed to the outskirts of Karakura Town, confirming the abnormal reaction of the ghost barrier, Kuroseki Ichigo also quickly approached Ishidori. Kuroseki Ichigo kept the same speed as Ishidori and greeted him. "Rai, did you sense it too? With your crude spiritual pressure sensing ability, you can tell. How could I not sense it?" After a pause, Ishidori couldn't help but roll his eyes at Kuroseki Ichigo and said venomously, "Also, I don't remember when I became so familiar with you. Please use a little more respect." "Ha ha ha," Kuroseki Ichigo said disapprovingly. "Sure enough, Rai is a kind-hearted and arrogant person." Ishidori's seemingly calm and cold appearance could not hold back a bit, and several veins popped out on his forehead instinctively. "Kuroseki Ichigo, do you want to be killed?" Uncle Kuroseki said this. As Kuroseki Ichigo said this with a playful look on his face, he almost silenced Ishidori. The next moment, Ishidori's speed suddenly increased and he ran straight to the suburbs with Kuroseki Ichigo, and Kuroseki Ichigo's voice came from behind. "Wait for me, Rai." In the invisible competition between Ishidori and Kuroseki Ichigo, they soon arrived at a forest on the outskirts of Karakura Town. Kurosaki Ichigo and Ishirai looked around and saw that there seemed to be no abnormal environment around them. They subconsciously reached out to the front, as if there was a thin film that easily allowed Kurosaki Ichigo and Ishirai to penetrate. Then, it seemed that due to the contact between Ichigo Kurosaki and Ryoshida, the ghost barrier also enveloped Ichigo Kurosaki and Ryoshida, and the surrounding environment suddenly changed dramatically. However, before Ichigo Kurosaki and Ryoshida could react, more than 10 secret mobile teams covered in black appeared around them, and took offensive postures to expel Ichigo Kurosaki and Ryoshida. Wait, at this time, Seireitei's voice sounded and stopped the actions of those secret mobile team members. In a flash, she appeared in front of Ichigo Kurosaki and Ryoshida. Death God Proxy Ichigo Kurosaki, Queen Seireitei. Seireitei, who seemed to be shrouded in a thick and gloomy aura, spoke lightly, making Ichigo Kurosaki and Ryoshida feel a chill in their hearts for some reason. However, the appearance of Seireitei, the captain of the 2nd Division, invisibly relieved Ichigo Kurosaki and Ryoshida. This at least shows that the change outside Karakura town was caused by Seireitei, not by Aizen Sasuke. Did something happen? Ichigo Kurosaki asked casually. This is not the scope of concern for a mere Shinigami deputy. What you should do now is to leave here immediately and not affect the search efficiency of the 2nd Division. Seireitei said expressionlessly. Ichigo Kurosaki and Ryoshida, who had hit a snag, looked at each other and were about to give up and return to Karakura town. Wait, Seireitei suddenly stopped Ichigo Kurosaki and Ryoshida, and then said, "Tell gynecology Kurosaki that I will go to her later, and if everything he told me before is false, I will definitely kill him." Then, before Ichigo Kurosaki and Ryoshida could ask in detail, Seireitei took the initiative to control the ghost barrier to open a gap and expel Ichigo Kurosaki and Ryoshida. Chapter 517. Severely injured Hitsuge Ichiro. However, when the surrounding environment returned to the normal appearance of the suburban forest, Ichigo Kurosaki was obviously very angry at Seireitei's inhuman appearance, and he muttered, "The arrogant flat-chested captain, that look is just like her husband ran away and she wants to ask Uncle Kurosaki for compensation." As for Ishirai, he stroked his chin and thought, "It's a bit strange, what is so important that the captain of the 2nd Division personally went out to search, and he didn't hesitate to use the ghost barrier to close off a large area, but, if it is a strong enemy, according to the agreement between Uncle Kurosaki and Captain General Yamamoto, Captain Seireitei should allow us to help." Ichigo Kurosaki said dissatisfiedly. "Who wants to help that arrogant flat-chested captain?" "But you, that flat-chested captain said so, and I didn't care at all." Ishirai pushed his glasses and answered without any disgust hidden in his words. "I never have any expectations for the god of death, so it doesn't matter what Captain Seireitei's attitude is." Just as Ichigo Kurosaki and Ryoshida were arguing and preparing to leave, Ryoshida's eyes suddenly became sharp and he shouted at the tree in front of him. "Who?" The next moment, Hitsuge Ichiro came out with a shaky figure. "Captain Hitsuge Aya." Ichigo Kurosaki and Ryoshida undoubtedly had a considerable impression of this dwarf captain. Then, under the somewhat puzzled gazes of Ichigo Kurosaki and Ryoshida, Hitsuge Ichiro fell straight to the ground. Bang! Ichigo Kurosaki and Ryoshida walked up and saw that there was a huge wound on Hitsuge Ichiro's chest, and even blood was still flowing out. "This wound, the situation is a bit bad," Ichigo Kurosaki said. "Let's go, take him back to Uncle Kurosaki first." "Alright, I'm as busy with Uncle Kurosaki today," Ishirai said, and then in the slightly confused eyes of Kurosaki Ichigo, he directly put Hitsuge Toshiro on the back of Kurosaki Ichigo. "Wait, why am I carrying him?" After reacting, Kurosaki Ichigo subconsciously asked. However, Ishirai had no intention of answering at all, and he left the forest first in a flash. "Damn it," Kurosaki Ichigo said, but in fact, he was quite kind in his heart and really couldn't ignore Hitsuge Toshiro, so he could only quickly follow him with this instant step. When Kurosaki Ichigo and Ishirai returned to the flower shop, Senju Cheng looked at the unconscious and seriously injured Hitsuge Toshiro, and couldn't help but be a little surprised. Then, Makoto Senju asked Arai Minui to treat Hitsuge Toshiro with the power of Time Gadan, and pretended to casually pick at Hitsuge Toshiro's wound, and then he judged the condition of the injury. "This is a wound left by zanpakutō. Strange." Makoto Senju was a little confused and asked about the specifics of what happened. When he heard the words that Seireitei had Kuroseki Ichigo tell him, he couldn't help but feel guilty. Could it be, did Seireitei discover his true identity? No. If that's the case, it's probably not just Seireitei who is blocking off an area in the suburbs, but Captain General Yamamoto and many other captains are coming here. Makoto Senju's thinking this, and as Seireitei finished the initial treatment of Hitsuge Yatsuru slowly woke up. Where is this? Hitsuge Yatsuru looked at the somewhat unfamiliar ceiling and was unable to react for a while. This is Karakura Town. Senju Makoto sat down beside Hitsuge Yatsuru's bed and spoke. What happened? As the captain of the 10th Division, you appeared alone in the real world, and it seems that the people of the 2nd Division are looking for you. Thinking of this, Senju Makoto couldn't help but think of another captain of the 10th Division in Karakura Town, Kuroseki Ishin. The 10th Division probably has some mysterious power that makes every captain like to run to the real world alone and then disappear. Kuroseki Makoto. Hitsuge Yatsuru seemed to have gradually regained consciousness, looked around, and said briefly, "Thank you." As for other things, Hitsuge Yatsuru, who frowned, seemed to have no intention of speaking at all, but struggled to get up and leave. Are you leaving just like that? Just as Hitsuge Yatsuru was about to step on the second floor windowsill and prepare to jump away, Senju Makoto's voice sounded from behind him. Hitsuge Yatsuru thought for a moment, turned his head and answered, "Later, I will find a way to repay you for treating me. If the person is dead, you can't repay anything." As Senju Makoto's voice sounded, before Hitsuge Yatsuru could say anything, he was suddenly lifted up by the collar by Senju Makoto, and then thrown towards the bed. This humiliating behavior immediately made Hitsuge Yatsuru, who had been tense, feel ashamed and angry, and questioned Senju Makoto. "Asshole, what are you doing? If you think you can beat me, you can try, otherwise stay here for now," Senju Makoto said. As soon as these words came out, Hitsuge Yatsuru's still somewhat immature face flushed again. You bastard." However, Hitsuge Yatsuru knew very well how terrifying Senju Makoto was. He was enough to fight Captain General Yamamoto, and he was not someone he could deal with at the moment. Not to mention, next to Kuroseki Makoto stood Kuroseki Ichigo and Ishirai, who had defeated him in a head-on duel. "What do you want to do?" Hitsuge Yatsuru asked in grief and indignation, like a little boy cornered by several big men. "What happened in the Seireitei? Why did Captain Hitsuge act alone and be searched by the 2nd Division?" Senju Makoto asked. Hitsuge Yatsuru took a few deep breaths and spoke. "It's not that there is a problem with the Seireitei, but that the king's seal was stolen." Then, in desperation, Hitsuge Yatsuru narrated the incident from his own perspective. After realizing that one of the two people who stole the king's seal was using Horinmara, it was probably his deceased friend Kusanagi Sojiro. Hitsuge Yatsuru decided to dissolve the unfinished bond with this friend who had left countless regrets in the past as a non-member of the GOTY 13th Division. In addition, another mysterious guy seems to be using Senlong, but the liberation words are somewhat different from those recorded in Jinglam time. At the time, the guy seemed to be chanting, "Show it, arrive, transcend, the ultimate of all things, the root of everything." In an instant, Senju Makoto's eyes, which had originally been calm, froze. Chapter 518 Surrounded. This is a little different from the zanpakutō of the vice-captain of the 4th Division in the history of the Seireitei, Makoto Senju, but after the zanpakutō was released, the ability it used was exactly the same as the all-seeing. I also found this quite strange, but when I was tracking later, the two guys separated in different directions, and I could only choose to chase the guy who used Horinmari all the way to the vicinity of Karakura Town. Then I was attacked and seriously injured, and the people at the 2nd Division discovered my tracks. Hitsuge Yatsuru didn't say anything more about the follow-up, but it was obviously because Ichigo Kuroseki and Rishida accidentally broke into the ghost barrier set up by the 2nd Division, which made Hitsuge Yatsuru accidentally escape. At this moment, Makoto Senju's eyes were solemn. Similar to Aizen Sosak's understanding of that king's seal, Makoto Senju also understood that the king's seal was a useless thing in a sense, and would instead make the Soul King Palace pay attention to Makoto Senju, so it was naturally impossible for him to deliberately steal the king's seal. So, what about the other all-seeing? More importantly, the liberation words of the all-seeing that Hitsuge Yatsuru repeated were the most correct liberation words, not the false liberation words that Senju Makoto left for the world. That is to say, that mysterious guy knows the true ability of the all-seeing. Thinking of this, Senju Makoto narrowed his eyes, and the whole person had already revealed a dangerous aura. Although it was unknown what the fake all-seeing could do, its appearance undoubtedly made Senju Cheng unable to ignore it. First of all, Senju Cheng ruled out that this was an illusion created by Mirror Flower Water Moon. Because even Aizen Sosop could not really know the true liberation words of all-seeing, and Mirror Flower Water Moon could not create corresponding illusions for things that he did not know. Then, who is it? Senju Cheng frowned, and then fell on Hitsuge Ichishiro. However, Hitsuge Ichishiro was obviously scared by Senju Cheng, and his heart tightened when he met Senju Cheng's gaze, and he said, "This matter has nothing to do with you, Quincy. It's almost time to stop here. I can handle the rest by myself. The loss of the King's Seal is obviously beyond the scope of a captain's solution," Senju Cheng said objectively. Hitsuge Ichishiro said with gritted teeth, "No, that is definitely Kusanagi Sojiro. I have a reason to solve it myself." Kusanagi Sojiro, this name is undoubtedly quite unfamiliar to Senju Cheng. After all, in a sense, Senju Cheng and Hitsuge Ichihiro's eras are just staggered. At this time, a series of spiritual pressure belonging to the Shinigami appeared around the flower shop, and it completely surrounded the entire flower shop from all directions. What? This sudden change made everyone in the flower shop stunned. Then, Senju Cheng, Hitsuge Ichishiro, Kurosaki Ichigo and others walked to their second floor window and looked out. In addition to the members of the second team, there were also Shinigami from the 7th, 8th and 11th teams around. In addition, 4 captains, Soifong, Komamura Sejin, Kakushansui, and Kinpachi Zaraki, also appeared at the door of the flower shop. Ishidarai pushed his glasses and spoke in a serious tone. "The situation seems to be a little wrong. How did they know I was here?" Hitsuge Ichishiro said with a sullen face. "Just for you, there is no need to dispatch 4 captains at this sensitive time." After a pause, Senju Cheng spoke. "It seems that in addition to what Captain Hitsuge said, something else should have happened in the Seireitei that we don't know. Should we prepare for the battle?" Ishidarai said in a deep voice. Kurosaki Ichigo said in a hurry. "Hey, Rai, don't be impulsive, just explain it well, okay? Don't be naive, Ichigo." Ishidarai shouted. "Do you think that only 4 captains will appear in front of you? If the target involves Uncle Kurosaki, Captain General Yamamoto may be dispatched at any time. If we stay in Karakura town for a long time, the entire Karakura town may be destroyed by the aftermath of the battle. The Shinigami don't really care about the destruction of the real world. Their ultimate goal is to protect the Soul Society no matter how they cover it up." While Ishidarai was scolding Kurosaki Ichigo in a low voice, the captains below, such as Soifong, also found Senju Cheng on the second floor of the flower shop. "Come out, Kurosaki Cheng, Kurosaki Ichigo, and Captain Hitsuge." Kakushansui said with his hat pressed down. Hitsuge Ichishiro turned his head to look at Senju Cheng and others beside him, and jumped down from the window to the ground first, and clarified. "It was my decision to act without authorization. It has nothing to do with Mr. Kurosaki Cheng and others." "Oh?" Captain Hitsuge's words can be understood as shielding an accomplice. Kakushansui said lightly. "What do you mean by shielding an accomplice?" "I don't know what Captain Kaku means." Hitsuge Ichishiro replied in a deep voice. "Are you still trying to quibble?" Kakushansui said. "Last night, Yukitik was attacked in Seireitei and nearly died, but you didn't expect that under Captain Unahana's superb medical skills, Yukitik has just woken up, right? And according to Yukitik's description, the abilities of his zanpakutō that attacked him, in addition to the Skuma final style, Onma cricket, also included Horinmara, Zanjutsu, and Shinromanzio's zanpakutō abilities." As soon as these words came out, not only Senju Cheng was quite surprised, but Kurosaki Ichigo was even more puzzled. Hitsuge Ichishiro subconsciously wanted to explain. "Wait, as for Horinmara, I can explain." Before Hitsuge Ichishiro could finish, Soifong interrupted him with a wave of her hand. "What else do you want to explain? No wonder Captain Hitsuge was able to escape the 2nd Division's search today. It turns out that he was secretly protected by Ichigo Kurosaki and others." After a pause, Soifong asked impatiently. "Also, who is using the zanpakutō of Senbon Bancho? How did he steal the power of the zanpakutō?" At this moment, Hitsuge Ichishiro was also confused and answered subconsciously. I don't know." "Since you don't know, then stay in the cage and think about the answer slowly. Capture them all." With Soifong's order, the Shinigami present almost acted at the same time. The target was not only Hitsuge Aishiro, but also everyone including Senju Cheng. And, it seemed that they had been prepared for it. A large-scale blockade-type ghost barrier rose around the flower shop, as if to completely block all the retreat routes of Hitsuge Aishiro, Senju Cheng and others. P.S. My wrist injury has flared up in the past few days, so I am typing very slowly, please forgive me. Chapter 519 The basis for the threat. In an instant, the 13th Gotti squad showed the war qualities that they should have as a violent military group. Hadeo 31. Red fire cannon. Not just one, but hundreds of red fire cannons fell towards the flower shop like bright fireballs. Moreover, the humans living around the flower shop, I don't know, and they have all fallen asleep under the influence of the ghost way. The ghost way barrier that covered the flower shop in a large area and circled a part of the area to serve as a battlefield was also invisibly expelling humans from this place. Obviously, all of this was prepared in advance. However, although the large area of red fire cannons was far inferior to the virtual flash torrent, the power of the explosion was so strong that it might not only completely flatten the flower shop, but even the surrounding streets would be seriously affected. Spirit barrier. Then, Senju Cheng raised his hand and faked the process of spirit particle absorption, quickly forming a spirit particle barrier around the flower shop, blocking the large area of red fire cannons. Boom boom boom, the endless red fire cannons exploded, making the air extremely scorched. However, as the fire wave dissipated, the seemingly fragile spirit barrier remained intact. The captains present were not surprised by this scene, or rather, if Makoto Senju couldn't do this with his ability, it would be strange. Kurosaki Makoto. At this moment, Kakushansui appeared in front of Makoto Senju, habitually pressed down his cloak, and the eyes hidden in the shadows looked at Makoto Senju and spoke. I advise you not to resist fiercely, or just play a game with me for a while. When the situation is completely under control, as long as you can explain the doubts in the many intelligence clearly, the Gotti 13 will choose to believe you. Captain Kirku, you are too arrogant. Makoto Senju narrowed his eyes and said with some dissatisfaction. Are you planning to start a war? There is no other way. In order to prevent the crisis from escalating, we have to control the situation as much as possible. Otherwise, if Mr. Kurosaki brings the king and unites with Aizen Sasuke, it will be a disaster for Soul Society. Kakushansui said with a sigh and helplessness. Senju Makoto narrowed his eyes and said. Do you think you can defeat me alone? Of course, no. Kakushansui spread his hands and said. If I can choose, I don't want to do the trouble of standing on the opposite side of Mr. Kurosaki, but, Kakushansui raised his head slightly and said meaningfully. This is not Soul Society. Mr. Kurosaki should understand what this means, right? This, Senju Makoto naturally understood. In addition to pointing out that the power gain of the Quincy clan in Soul Society is far greater than that in the real world, even the density of spirit particles in Karakura Town, which is a heavy spiritual land, cannot support the squandering of endless spirit particle rain. More importantly, if it weren't in Soul Society, Yamamoto Jinrai Shichikuni's Zanpakutō wouldn't have to worry about whether it would destroy the entire Soul Society even if he used his Bankai. As for how much damage would be caused to the real world, the Gotti 13 might care, but it's clear that they don't take it that seriously. The stability of the real world, Huko Mundo, and Soul Society, in the final analysis, is essentially for the sake of protecting the court in the Gotti 13's philosophy. So, Senju Makoto looked at the gate that had not yet closed not far away. Schrodinger's door. In other words, Yamamoto Jinrai Shichikuni might show up in person at any time. As expected of Mr. Kurosaki, it seems that you have understood what I mean. Kakushansui said with a smile. So let's just chat and wait for the rest of the people to finish the battle, how about that? In this way, we can avoid greater losses. Are you threatening me? Senju Makoto narrowed his eyes and asked. Kakushansui waved his hand nonchalantly and said. How could that be? But the position of the 13th Gotti squad, boom. Before Kakushansui could finish his words, there was a sudden explosion in the air. Kakushansui only had time to notice that Senju Makoto had disappeared from the spot, but before he could react, Senju Makoto's figure had already appeared beside him, and the white and slender palm covered Kakushansui's face. How could it be so fast? Kakushansui only had time to think of this. Captain Kirku, threats, need confidence. As the first half of these words reached Kakushansui's ears, the palm that was grabbing Kakushansui's face suddenly exerted force and lifted Kakushansui to the ground and slammed him hard. Kakushansui, wearing a pink fancy coat, almost slammed to the ground like a basketball being slammed. Boom boom. A huge roar mixed with bursts of smoke rose up. This scene completely shocked the surrounding Shinigami, and even the captains who were fighting with Ichigo Kurosaki, Ryashida, and Trishiro Hitsugaya were stunned. No matter what, Shunsui Kiku is a veteran captain who has been in the position of captain for nearly 1,000 years. How could he be knocked away after a confrontation? Makoto Senju, who was standing in the air above the giant pit that gradually appeared on the ground, slowly spoke. But no matter how I look at you, I don't think you have the confidence to threaten me in front of me, Captain Kiku, ahem. In the giant pit that was almost several meters deep on the ground, Shunsui Kiku felt that his bones were almost broken, and his internal organs that suffered a major impact could not help coughing. He stood up with difficulty, holding his zanpakutō in his hand, and said, "Is this your answer, Makoto Kurosaki?" However, in almost another instant, Shunsui Kiku felt that his eyes were blurred, and Makoto Senju disappeared again at the same time. Senju Makoto appeared beside Kiku Shunsui, and only when he put his hand on his shoulder did Kiku Shunsui seem to react. "Captain Kiku, you are too arrogant. As a weak person facing a strong person, you didn't even use your bankai at the first time. Did you underestimate me or overestimate yourself?" Senju Makoto spoke slowly, and the light words entered Kiku Shunsui's ears, which made Kiku Shunsui's muscles tense up. Before, Kiku Shunsui's impression of Senju Makoto was only about his strange swordsmanship and endless rain of spirit arrows, but the speed was so fast. Almost subconsciously, Kiku Shunsui swung his knife back and slashed at Senju Makoto beside him. Chapter 520 Different Treatment. However, before the zanpakutō could reach Senju Makoto, Kiku Shunsui suddenly felt a heavy blow to his knee, and his whole body softened. Senju Makoto's hand, which was originally on Kiku Shunsui's shoulder, suddenly exerted force, and Kiku Shunsui seemed to have no room for resistance, and was suddenly pressed down to the ground by Senju Makoto again. Boom. Another loud bang. Kiku Shunsui's face came into close contact with the ground, making Kiku Shunsui feel that his whole head was buzzing. Captain. At this moment, when the other captains had already started fighting with Kurosaki Ichigo and others, in order to rescue Kiku Shunsui, a delicate shout came from the 8th Division. Then, an intelligent and familiar figure appeared not far from Senju Makoto. Nanao. Raising his palm, the 61 binding technique. 6 starflight prison in an instant, while Senju Makoto was still holding Kiku Shunsui on the ground. 6 pieces of light suddenly appeared around his body, and suddenly closed together to lock Senju Makoto in the middle. And this seemed to be just the beginning. Nanao, who served as the vice-captain only by virtue of his attainments in the ways of the ghost, almost repeatedly broke the chant and released a large number of ghost ways. The 63 binding technique. Locking bars the 62 binding technique. 100-step railing the 30 binding technique. 3 mouth flashes almost in the blink of an eye. Senju Makoto had 4 more ways of binding on his body, and these 4 ways of binding seemed to be combined with each other to form a stronger binding ability. Then, Nanao rushed to Senju Makoto, trying to drag Kiku Shunsui, who was pressed to the ground by Senju Makoto, out. Bang. In the eyes of Nanao, who couldn't believe it, the combination of these several bindings was enough to trap Kiku Shunsui for a short time, but it suddenly broke on Senju Makoto's body. Moreover, Senju Makoto's other hand was grasped on the wrist of Nanao, who was trying to pull out Kiku Shunsui. This made Nanao's pupil shrink, and the fear that arose spontaneously made Nanao's hair stand up. How terrifying is Senju Makoto's fighting power! The miserable appearance of Kiku Shunsui, who was pressed to the ground in just 2 encounters, is enough to explain a lot of things. And now, he was also caught by Senju Makoto. Indistinctly, Nanao even had an illusion that he was about to see his grandmother. However, the scene that was expected to be torn apart in an instant did not appear. Senju Makoto's white 5 fingers grasped Nanao's wrist, but he only gently pulled Nanao's palm away. Senju Makoto looked at Nanao's fearful expression, and as his mind turned, he casually found an excuse and said, "Don't worry, I don't hit women." As soon as these words came out, Seireitei, who was fighting with Ishidori at the moment, subconsciously looked at Senju Makoto. In the grove of Seireitei before, this guy didn't have the slightest awareness of not hitting women. Different treatment. Then, an absurd idea inexplicably emerged in Seireitei's mind, making Seireitei's face darken. Or am I not considered a woman in the eyes of the bastard Kurosaki Makoto? For a moment, Seireitei's eyes fell on Izaneo. It must be said that Izaneo is undoubtedly a typical intellectual beauty, and her figure can be described as thin where it should be thin, and fleshy where it should be. Sting and kill all enemies. Sparrowphone. In anger, Seireitei released her zanpakutō directly, and her eyes looked at Seireitei with a hint of murderous intent. This time, the captain of the Seireitei who was sent to deal with Ichigo Kurosaki, Seireitei and Hitsugaya was obviously well thought out. Not to mention Byakuya Kachika, who needed a long time to decide the winner with Ichigo Kurosaki. Seireitei's extreme speed and two-hit kill ability can be regarded as the nemesis of Seireitei in a sense. The huge destructive power generated by Komamura Sujin's zanpakutō ability is also something that Hitsugaya cannot easily freeze. In addition, the surrounding Shinigami occasionally assisted or restrained with Kitten. It can be said that except for Makoto Senju's unexpected overwhelming defeat of Kakushansui, the situation is undoubtedly in an extremely disadvantageous state. While being surprised at Makoto Senju's gentleness towards her, Nanao took a deep breath and spoke calmly. Surrender, Kurosaki Makoto, the captain is here. If you don't want most of Karakura town to be destroyed in the aftermath of the battle between you and the captain, this is your only choice. What's more, the surrounding ghost barrier will not only block your retreat, but also prevent the spirits of Karakura town, which is a heavy spiritual land, from continuing to flow into this area. This is a fatal disadvantage for your Quincy clan, isn't it? Upon hearing this, Senju Makoto released the hand that was pressed on Kakushansui's head, who was almost completely unconscious after being hit hard, and slowly stood up and looked directly at Izaneo in front of him. In an instant, even with Izaneo's calmness, facing the guy in front of him who could take his life at any time, he still couldn't help but speak nervously. What do you want to do? However, at this moment, boom. The ghost barrier on the southeast side of the flower shop suddenly erupted with a huge roar, and directly broke a large hole from the relatively fragile outer periphery of the ghost barrier. What? This sudden change caused everyone present to look in that direction subconsciously. The person who appeared in the gap was a sturdy and strong man with curly brown short hair. He looked like a human, but his arms were strangely black with red stripes and white with red stripes. Seeing this, Ichigo Kurosaki subconsciously exclaimed, Yusu. This person was the Tater of Chadari, who Ichigo Kurosaki was extremely worried about because of his disappearance a few days ago. Tater of Chadari looked around the battlefield and shouted calmly, Ichigo, hurry. Ichigo Kurosaki heard this, although Tater of Chadari seemed to have some incredible changes, but he still subconsciously chose to believe his friend who was taciturn and trustworthy in the past, and turned his head to look at Makoto Senju. Obviously, what Ichigo Kurosaki expressed was that he was inclined to evacuate through the gap opened by Tater of Chadari. Senju Makoto hesitated for a moment, and chose to temporarily avoid a direct conflict with the Gotti 13, and spoke. Let's go. As Senju Makoto said this, Ichigo Kurosaki, Ryashida, and Trishiro Hitsugaya broke away from their opponents and ran towards the gap opened by a suitor of Chad. And Synopsis, who had been hiding in the flower shop and had not taken any action, also flashed in a flash, protecting Miyu and Dorai Minue, and rushed to the gap first. P.S. My wrist is getting worse. There are only 2 updates today. I may need to see a doctor. Chapter 521. Punching for the other side. In common sense, when a being similar to a god of death enters a cyborg, it can only exert the functions of the cyborg itself. Therefore, when a god of death enters the battle stage, he will choose to leave the cyborg and restore his spiritual body. However, the realm doll used by Synopsis is not at the same level as an ordinary cyborg. On the surface, the main component of the realm doll may still be the instrument, but over the years, Makoto Senju has experimented and applied all the results obtained by Ishidori's tempering of his own body to the realm doll. In a sense, if Ishidori can be regarded as Makoto Senju's experimental subject for the relationship between the instrument and the spirit, then the realm doll is the first-generation product. At this moment, in the eyes of the god of death, Synopsis, who looks no different from a human and does not reveal any spiritual pressure, bursts out with a speed that is no less than that of a captain-level god of death. However, how could the Gotti 13 watch Ichigo Kurosaki and others escape from the ghost barrier so easily? If I let you run away like this, I will be too ashamed to face the captain. Seeing that he could not keep up with the speed, Komamura Sujin thrust his zanpakutō into the ground, his spiritual pressure soaring, and he shouted angrily. Bankai! Black wrote Heavenly Punishment Mu in an instant. The huge black armored warrior appeared from behind Komamura Sajin. His heavy body stepped on the ground, and his head almost touched the top of the bowl-shaped ghost barrier. Slash. Komamura Sajin clenched his zanpakutō with both hands and stepped forward, slashing in the direction of Ishirai and others in a kendo posture. The Black wrote Heavenly Punishment Mu also moved synchronously, and the giant sword that could easily split the mountain to shred the air, set off a terrifying storm and fell towards Ishirai and others. Compared with the past, Komamura Sajin's attack was obviously very different. If we say that Komamura Sajin's sword swing in the past relied more on his innate spiritual body and brute force, then at this moment, Kuroseki Ichigo saw the shadow of Kendo in it. Holding the sword with both hands, the skillful and violent force can make the power of the slash far greater than the rough slashing. In an instant, just when Kuroseki Ichigo and Ishirai were about to turn around and try to block this earth-shattering blow, Chad Tater's steady and brief voice sounded, "You continue to evacuate, leave this to me. Then, run." There is no flash step of the God of Death, nor the flying foot of the Annihilation Master. Chad Tater is just like a normal human, step by step, and actively charged towards the fallen giant sword. This scene is like a tiny human challenging a giant head-on, and it is also like Don Quixote challenging a windmill, which seems to be overestimating one's own ability. Even Kuroseki Ichigo, who knows Chad Tater too well, was stunned for a moment. When Ichigo Kuroseki reacted, he shouted subconsciously. Wait a minute. However, Chad Tater and the giant sword were already very close. The violent wave pressed down on Chad Tater, but his broad and sturdy back did not shake at all. The right arm of the giant, the moment the right arm with a black background and red lines was raised above the head, the shape also changed and turned into a shield-like form. However, this scene that overestimated his own strength and was extremely impactful shocked Komamura Satsuki, but he did not hold back at all. Protecting the Seireitei and following the beliefs of Yamamoto Shinigami Shibukuni, this is the justice and loyalty of Komamura Satsuki. For this reason, after being defeated by Ishirai in the battle-killing hill, Komamura Satsuki learned from the pain and worked hard to comprehend a bit of the sword art belonging to Yamamoto Shinigami Shibukuni in the body of an orc. Boom. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the Black wrote Heavenly Punishment King's earth-shattering blow fell with a bang. At this moment, the entire present world surrounded by the ghost barrier was shaken, and the earth seemed to jump suddenly. The residents of Karakura town, which was even more peripheral, also seemed to have an earthquake error. However, the smoke dissipated. Chad Tater was not crushed into a meat paste by the giant sword. The giant's right arm, raised high, seemed to be a pillar supporting the world and steadily resisted the giant sword. On the contrary, Chad Tater's right side seemed to have turned into a black background with red lines. What? This scene not only surprised the death gods such as Komamura Sajin, but also Kuroseki Ichigo and Ishirai. Is this still the Chad Tater who was easily moved in the conflict with Ishirai in Karakura Town First High School not long ago? Hitsuge Ayashiro, who stopped beside Ichigo Kuroseki, seemed to be unable to hold back his cold expression, and spoke in shock. Your human friend is so strong. Ichigo Kuroseki held back for a long time, but the last time Ichigo Kuroseki fought side by side with Tater Chadara was when he dealt with some small thugs, so he could only say one sentence. Tater, you are always very trustworthy. However, it was not just Komamura Sajin who tried to stop Ichigo Kuroseki and others from evacuating. Bankai. Senbon Bancho as a proud and cold voice sounded. Countless cherry blossoms suddenly appeared on the battlefield, and then rolled towards Ichigo Kuroseki and others like a torrent, intending to temporarily block the gap in the ghost barrier that was temporarily opened. You go first, Byakuya, I will hold you back. Seeing this, Ichigo Kuroseki also quickly performed his Bankai, swinging out several black crescent-shaped sky stripes in a row. However, Byakuya Kachiki obviously knew everything about Ichigo Kuroseki's attack method. The cherry blossoms were destroyed by the black crescent moon sky strike, but they were quickly made up by the endless number. Unlike the last time when he had to fight Ichigo Kuroseki due to his duty as a member of the Gotti 13, and had to hold back and worry about it because of his preference for Rukia Kachiki, Byakuya Kachiki showed his combat intelligence far more than before. The attack and defense of the Senbon Bancho made Ichigo Kuroseki feel even more difficult. With the attack method of Crescent Moon Sky Strike, it was almost impossible to completely block the attack of Kajiki Senbon Bancho. However, just when the large piece of cherry blossoms was about to touch Ichigo Kuroseki, The burly figure of Cheng-ge once again blocked Ichigo Kurosaki. The giant's right arm was stretched out like a huge shield, and the left arm with red patterns on a white background was pulled back. Seeing this, Ichigo Kurosaki subconsciously wanted to say something. "Chat, you," however, before Ichigo Kurosaki could finish, Cheng tilted his head slightly and spoke. "Ichigo, do you remember our promise to fist each other?" Chapter 522. The Demon's Attack. After these words came out, Ichigo Kurosaki was slightly startled, and subconsciously recalled the past with Cheng. It was a story of two junior high school students facing a group of hooligans and protecting each other. It was also from then on that Cheng, who regarded each other as an important friend, made a promise to fight for each other in the future. "So, I will never allow anyone to hurt you. Ichigo." Cheng's eyes covered by curly hair condensed, and he let out a low roar. Suddenly, a bunch of hideous barbs appeared on the clenched devil's left arm, and the other side of Cheng's body seemed to be covered with a layer of white background and red lines. The devil's attack. The next moment, Cheng swung his left arm towards the seemingly endless torrent of cherry blossoms in front of him. Boom! The air exploded and roared. The cracks that appeared in the air seemed to form the outline of a skeleton demon. Wherever the crazy air cracks passed, countless cherry blossoms were almost instantly annihilated. Kachikabyukai felt the countless cherry blossoms that Senbon Bancho shattered in an instant, and witnessed the huge skeleton demon outline formed on the air cracks, and subconsciously said in shock. What kind of power is this? However, no one could answer Kachikabyukai, and even Kurosaki Ichigo was pulled by Cheng-ge with a confused look on his face and retreated towards the gap. Seeing that Kurosaki Ichigo and his men were about to retreat outside the gap in the ghost barrier, it was too late for the captains present to stop them. Bang! A majestic and old voice followed from the world-crossing gate into the present world. Castle flames in an instant, flames with a temperature of over 6,000 degrees spread out, as if making the entire air become abnormally hot. Seeing this, Cheng-ge, who was guarding Ichigo Kurosaki and the others to evacuate, was about to turn around to block the attack again. Suddenly, a hand was placed on Cheng-ge's shoulder, and a gentle voice sounded. "Chat, it is a very foolish choice to try to touch that level of fire with your body." Cheng-ge turned his head and saw that it was Senju Cheng. Then, Senju Cheng raised his hand and clenched it forward. A large amount of spirit particles were forcibly absorbed to form a spirit particle arrow on the spirit bow that had just formed in Senju Cheng's hand. Pull the bow, shoot. The whole action was done in one go, flowing like water, giving people an artistic beauty. Then, Senju Cheng turned around and walked out of the gap without any hesitation, or the intention of seeing the result. "Let's go," Senju Cheng said calmly, which made Cheng-ge slightly startled, and then subconsciously followed. As for the flames behind him that seemed to burn everything, Cheng-ge instinctively ignored it. The next moment, when the spirit arrow collided with the castle flame, countless flames exploded, as if to dye the sky red, becoming the only color behind the gap where Senju Cheng and others left. Moreover, the remaining flames that exploded became a natural barrier that temporarily blocked the pursuit of the other death gods. This scene made Cheng-ge stunned, and he couldn't help but stare at Senju Cheng in a daze. Noticing Cheng-ge's expression, Kurosaki Ichigo asked, "What's wrong, Chat?" Kurosaki teacher seems to be different from usual." Cheng-ge answered subconsciously. "Didn't you expect Uncle Kurosaki to be so strong?" Kurosaki Ichigo said with some pride. "No," Cheng-ge shook his head and said. "I didn't expect that Kurosaki teacher would have such a heroic and confident side." Hearing this, Kurosaki Ichigo also reacted a little slowly. It seems, today's Senju Cheng, even compared to the Seireitei, is indeed a little different, as if he has really become serious. Whether it was defeating Kakushansui in a single encounter, or blocking the attack of Captain General Yamamoto, the spirit and attitude revealed were somewhat different. Then, Ichigo Kurosaki couldn't help but ask, "Uncle Kurosaki, what should we do next?" Obviously, everything that happened suddenly made Ichigo Kurosaki's mind still in a mess. He didn't understand what happened at all, and he stood on the opposite side of the Gotti 13 again. What Zanjitsu attack Captain Yuki? That was obviously impossible. Makoto Senju looked around at the people around him, Synopsis, Nikan Mu, Inoue Ichigo Kurosaki, Ishidori, Cheng-ge, and Hitsuge Itoshiro. Several thoughts emerged in Makoto Senju's mind, and then fell on Cheng-ge, and said, Chad should have prepared a place for us, right? Chad Tater seemed a little surprised at how Senju Cheng knew about this. His fierce look disappeared. He scratched his curly hair and said, yes, yes. Then led the way. Let's leave Karakura town first. Otherwise, if we continue to provoke old man Yamamoto, he might re-release his Bankai at all costs in this heavy spiritual land. Senju Cheng said, and then signaled Chad Tater to lead the way, while Kurosaki Ichigo led Chad Tater to hurry on the road. Wait, I won't go with you. This matter has dragged you down. I will give you an answer as soon as possible. Hitsuge Ichiro said, and regardless of Kurosaki Ichigo's dissuasion, he decided to leave alone, as if he was going to investigate and solve the mystery alone. This time, Makoto Senju did not stop Hitsuge Ichiro, but went in the direction that Yasuda Chad said. He soon left the scope of Karakura town and stopped in front of a seemingly shabby apartment in Naruki City. At this time, Ryashida gave Makoto Senju a look. Suddenly, Makoto Senju understood what Ryashida meant. There was no doubt that this was the base of the execution organization that Ryashida had secretly monitored for several days. The elevator of the shabby apartment opened, and all the execution members appeared in front of Makoto Senju and others. Tsutsuma Hyakuro, who was at the front, bowed slightly and spoke in a warm tone. I am Tsutsuma Hyakuro, and I welcome Mr. Makoto Kurosaki and all future partners to execution. Execution. This word is undoubtedly quite unfamiliar to Ichigo Kurosaki. Because of Yasuda Chad, Ichigo Kurosaki instinctively developed a few good feelings and trust for execution and asked, what kind of organization is execution? Tsutsuma Hyakuro asked with a bit of self-mockery. In simple terms, it is an organization of full-bringers, but in essence, they are a group of rats who were oppressed by the Seireitei and can only huddle together for warmth. P.S. There will be a third update today, but because of the speed of typing, it will be updated later. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 523 Justice and Balance. The self-deprecating tone and helpless look resonated with Ichigo Kurosaki, who had just experienced the attack of the 13th Gotti Squad. Makoto Senju did not speak, but let Ichigo Kurosaki speak. He asked with some confusion. But what is full bring? As for full bring, Tsutsuma Hyakuro thought for a moment and spoke to Tater Chad. Tater is the user of full bring and the newest member of our execution. What? Ichigo Kurosaki looked at Tater Chad with some surprise, and couldn't help but think of the amazing power that Tater Chad had just displayed. Not long ago, Tater Chad was just an ordinary human, but Tater Chad had just taken on the Black Road Heavenly Punishment Mu and forcibly defeated Kajiki Senbon Sakura. The amazing offensive and defensive ability was so amazing that even Ichigo Kurosaki couldn't help but stare at it in shock. In response to Ichigo Kurosaki, Tater Chad nodded slightly. So, Tater, you have been missing for the past week because of execution? Ichigo Kurosaki asked. Yes. Chad Tater answered. Tsutsuma Hyakuro seemed to be used to Chad Tater's silence and took the initiative to explain. A week ago, we learned that the Gotti 13 was preparing to find an excuse to deal with Mr. Kurosaki Makoto and others, and to completely eliminate the unstable factors before the decisive battle with Aizen Sasuke. Of course, we also know that it is not easy to gain Mr. Kurosaki Makoto's trust, so we can only try to let Shishigawa use that method to hope that Mr. Kurosaki Makoto's attention and vigilance will be aroused. Although the result was not very good, we unexpectedly found Chad training in the suburbs, and found that Chad was on the verge of mastering the full bring, so we took Chad back to execution for special training. Wait, at this time, Ishidarai pushed his glasses and interrupted. You mean that Chad has been training in this apartment for a while, and has mastered this level of power in less than a week? That's a bit inaccurate. Tsutsuma Hyakuro seemed to be a little embarrassed. How about we talk inside the apartment? If we're here, I can't help but worry about whether we'll be monitored by the 13th Division of the Gotti. Ishidarai frowned slightly, feeling that something was not right, and turned his head to look at Senju Cheng. Senju Cheng nodded slightly in response to Ishidarai, saying, then please let the way, Mr. Tsutsuma. Please. Tsutsuma Hyakuro smiled, and then led everyone into the spacious elevator that was completely different from the style of the shabby apartment. Soon, as the elevator moved and opened, in front of everyone appeared a gentleman with short hair combed back to his neck, tall and strong, and wearing a black coat with a fluffy collar. Then, the gentleman took the initiative to greet Senju Makoto and said with a smile on his face, "Mr. Kurosaki Makoto, I've heard of your name for a long time, and today I finally meet you." Looking at the gentleman with the host's demeanor, Senju Makoto asked calmly, "Who are you?" "Jinjuko." Jinjuko introduced himself. "The first generation of Shinigami deputy, and also the real leader of execution, just to avoid the eyes and ears of Seireitei, so Tsutsuma is usually in charge of external affairs." Then, Jinjuko invited everyone to sit down very enthusiastically, and asked Zawakariko to mix cocktails for everyone, and then complained with a sigh, saying, "This time it was really lucky. Fortunately Tatara's fullbring was very powerful, otherwise if we wanted to help Mr. Kurosaki Makoto out of this siege, we would have to lead the entire persecution to fight the 13th Division of the Gotti. It's Mr. Jinjo who is amazing. It's amazing that he trained Tatara, who was originally just an ordinary person, to this level in just 1 week." However, when Senju Makoto said this, his expressionless look made Jinjuko's expression slightly stiff. Then, Jinjuko smiled bitterly and said, "Not really. If I really had this ability, why would I be chased around like a rat in front of the 13th Gotti squad? So chat ability is not entirely the result of special training, because my fullbring ability can distribute my own fullbring power to other fullbringers, so Tatara's combat power can soar to this level." Senju Makoto's eyes moved. If Jinjuko didn't lie, then chat Tatara's amazing growth and combat power would be understandable. "I see." However, Jinjuko, Tsutsuma Hyakuro and even the entire persecution showed their undisguised disgust for the 13th Gotti squad, which made Nirvana feel a little dissatisfied instinctively. Although Nirvana has now decided to follow Senju Makoto to find his own meaning, for Nirvana, the Seireitei is undoubtedly a place similar to his hometown. In addition to Lord Mayuri Kurasuchi, there are also the members of the Female Death God Association, etc., who were all subconsciously cherished by Nirvana. Nirvana commented calmly, "Being treated as a rat by the 13th Gotti squad, you must have done something wrong, right?" This statement undoubtedly triggered the hostility of the entire persecution. Jinjuko glanced at the appearance of the shadow doll and asked with a somewhat dissatisfied look, "Who is this?" "My goddaughter." Senju Makoto said lightly, but blocked Jinjuko's next words. Originally, according to Jinjuko's information, both Shadow and Rem were just ordinary clerks in a flower shop. However, Jinjuko's attitude changed and he complained, "It seems that you have all been completely deceived by the righteous appearance of the 13th Gotti squad that seems to maintain the balance of the world." Then, Jinjuko stood up with a cocktail in his hand, and spoke with a deep gaze as if he was recalling something. In the more ancient times, the Hollows of Hukomundo, the Shinigami of Soul Society, and the Queensies of the human world, these three were already maintaining a mysterious balance among themselves. So why did the Gotti 13 need to act as the righteous one as if the balance of the world depended on itself? In the final analysis, it's only the victors who give themselves justice. Thousands of years ago, the Queensies who failed in the war defined as Sims, and the Gotti 13, which was originally just a group of ruthless killers, was given the name of Justice. What followed was the Gotti 13's uninterrupted extermination and war against the Queensies for thousands of years, until they completely dominated the right to speak in the human world, and even defined it as common sense that every city should be guarded by a Shinigami. I'm sure that Mr. Makoto Kurosaki and Mr. Ryashida, who are Queensies, can relate to this, right? Chapter 524 Loophole. Jinjuko's words undoubtedly touched Ishidori's heart, and Senju Makoto took a sip of his cocktail and replied, "A little bit." However, this is something that Senju Makoto, who is actually a god of death, cannot understand at all. Perhaps, what Jinjuko said is true. But when has the order of the world been stipulated to be eternal? The Queency was defeated, and the Gotti 13 was in charge of the order of the Soul Society in the real world, which is also common sense. However, there is one thing that Jinjuko's attitude is not wrong. The fundamental purpose of the Gotti 13 is undoubtedly to protect the Seireitei. As for the protection of the real world, it is nothing more than that the real world is also one of the cornerstones of maintaining the stability of the Soul Society. The Shinigami group's generally friendly attitude towards humans is more because the Shinigami who came from Rukongai are all derived from the souls of humans after death. But for the top leaders of the GOTY 13, whether it is the lives of the residents of Cheng-ge or the losses of the real world, they are worth sacrificing without hesitation when it comes to the idea of maintaining the Seireitei. Jinjokiko thought that his impassioned speech could resonate with Kurosaki Makoto and others who had just been attacked by the 13th GOTY Division, but he was met with a small but soft nail, and his expression could not help but become a little embarrassed. However, soon, Jinjokiko's face regained its warm and friendly expression and said, "Speaking of which, there is one thing that Mr. Kurosaki Makoto is not clear about, right?" Senju Makoto raised his eyebrows and looked at Jinjokiko. Then, Jinjokiko took out a wooden sign with a skull pattern engraved on it from his arms. Kurosaki Ichigo was surprised and said, "This is the Death God Proxy Certificate? Yes, I should have stated my identity. I am the first generation of Death God Proxy." "So, Kurosaki Ichigo, do you know what the Death God Proxy Certificate is for?" Before Kurosaki Ichigo could give his naive answer based on the Seireitei, Jinjokiko spoke with a gloomy face. "It's monitoring and suppression. Monitor the status and location of the Shinigami proxy at any time, and when necessary, the Shinigami proxy certificate can forcibly suppress the power of the holder, so that the GOTY 13 can capture them." As soon as these words came out, Ishidori's face changed, and he couldn't help but speak. "So, isn't our current location also known to the Seireitei?" Jinjokiko said with a smile. "Don't worry about this. As the first-generation Shinigami proxy, I naturally know how to counter the effect of the Shinigami proxy certificate, so the GOTY 13 can't find us for the time being." However, Jinjokiko turned his eyes and was somewhat surprised to find that there was no trace of anger on Senju Makoto's face, that he was deceived, but just looked at him lightly. This made Jinjokiko inexplicably feel like a monkey jumping up and down to sell misery, and he didn't even win the audience's recognition and sympathy. And Senju Makoto, who seemed to be relaxing and deeply immersed in a sofa, shook the cocktail in his hand, looking at the different light reflected in the slightly dim light, and said, "Mr. Jinjo has said almost everything he wanted to say, right?" "What do you mean? What do you think?" Senju Makoto asked. Under Senju Makoto's gaze, Jinjokiko felt a little flustered, but he still pretended to be calm. "We have experienced the same betrayal, so we should be able to understand each other. Only if we unite with each other can we have revenge on the GOTY 13. Suddenly, Senju Makoto changed his tone and said, "You haven't taken back the power you gave to Chad?" No. Jinjokiko said subconsciously. Suddenly, a Quincy spirit particle array suddenly opened at the place where Senju Makoto was standing, almost covering the entire hall. The next moment, before everyone could react, a large number of spirit particle chains suddenly extended from the Quincy spirit particle array and entangled the members of Execution. What? Damn it. In a moment, in the chaos, all the members of Execution were bound and controlled by the spirit chains. "Asshole Quincy, what are you doing? Asshole who repays kindness with enmity, we saved you. Let me go, asshole." Amid the angry curses of the Execution members, the only exception, Chad Tatara, who was not bound by the spirit chain, stood up suddenly, walked in front of Senju Makoto, and questioned. "Teacher Kurosaki, why did you attack them? You need to give me a reason, otherwise, I can only attack you." "Be patient, Chad-san." Senju Makoto was not angry at Chad Tatara's rudeness. He gestured to Chad Tatara to be quiet first, and then turned his eyes to Jinjokiko, who was tightly bound in the spirit circle, and spoke. "Mr. Jinjo, it seems that you have done this without telling your friends." Jinjokiko's face seemed to show confusion, and then he shouted angrily. "Kurosaki Makoto, I don't know what you are talking about, you bastard. I regard you as an ally that can be won over, and you were actually going to attack as Execution." Senju Makoto continued to speak. "I am curious, who did you reach an agreement with? You made all these illusions to win us over to the opposite side of the GOTY 13. I don't understand what you are talking about." Jinjokiko said with gritted teeth. "Don't understand? It doesn't matter." Senju Makoto looked down at Jinjokiko below and said, "You actually grasped the timing and situation quite well. Although I don't know how you led the 13th Court Guard to launch such an urgent siege against me, your perfect rescue timing and your past that makes people feel empathy really make it easy to gain our trust. So what? Where did the loophole come from?" Jinjokiko stared at Senju Makoto with a stern face and asked. "Time difference." Senju Makoto raised a finger and said, In order to avoid Kusukushin appearing in front of me too abruptly, you deliberately asked Shishigawa to go to the flower shop, but this time was before the royal seal was stolen. Logically speaking, before this time point, the 13th Court Guard would never have the idea of attacking us. Even if they did, they would have suppressed this dangerous idea in the face of the threat from Aizen Sosok. In fact, it is more accurate that Senju Makotao secretly went to Hukomundo through Synopsis to communicate with Zaraki Fire, and learned about Kusanagi Sojiro's plan to steal the royal seal and destroy the Seireitei. Chapter 525 Amazing Power. What's more interesting is that Shishigawa arrived at the flower shop before Aizen Sosok contacted Kusanagi Sojiro. That is to say, the plan to reach a cooperation agreement with Jinjo Kyuga and guide Senju Makotao and Seireitei to the opposite side was before Kusanagi Sojiro attacked the King's Seal. In addition, Senju Makotao learned from Hitsuge Ichiro that when Kusanagi Sojiro attacked the King's Seal transfer team, there was a mysterious existence using Senro Onksayang. Then, according to the chronological order, some results came out naturally. First, Jinjo Kyuga reached an agreement with a mysterious existence, and then that mysterious existence mixed with Kusanagi Sojiro to snatch the King's Seal. Finally, by attacking Ikiti Joshiro and other unknown methods, the Gotti 13th Division was convinced that Kurosaki Makotao and others had mixed with Aizen Sosok and Kusanagi Sojiro to destroy the Seireitei, forcing the Gotti 13th Division to try to attack Senju Makotao and others first. The plan was perfect. In order to further gain the trust of Makotao Senju and others, Jinjo Kyuga even deliberately cultivated Chad-Yasutura, who was a good friend of Ichigo Kurosaki, and asked Chad-Yasutura to rescue Makotao Senju and others. If there was insufficient intelligence, Ichigo Kurosaki and others might subconsciously regard Jinjo Kyuga and others as trustworthy partners. But Jinjo Kyuga underestimated Makotao Senju's understanding of the Seireitei, and had no idea how many captains Makotao Senju could influence in the decisions of the 13th Gotti Squad if he wanted to. Therefore, it was impossible for the 13th Gotti Squad to prepare to attack Makotao Senju a week in advance, and Jinjo Kyuga would need to remind Makotao Senju instead. So, Mr. Jinjo, can you cooperate and tell me who the other party you are cooperating with is? Makotao Senju asked, looking down at Jinjo Kyuga. Since you haven't done anything harmful to us, and you've helped Chad, I won't investigate further. Ha 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 ha. However, Jinjo Kyuga suddenly burst into laughter, and the spiritual pressure on Jinjo Kyuga suddenly soared to a level far beyond that of an ordinary captain. What? You're smarter than I thought. Then, Jinjo Kyuga, who was originally suppressed, slowly stood up under the restraint of the spirit chain. This amazing spiritual pressure made everyone present show horror on their faces. To some extent, this level of spiritual pressure has even surpassed that of veteran captains like Kukushansui. Even the Kusukushin members lying on the ground around them couldn't help but show surprise. Originally, I was planning to win you over a little and use you as cannon fodder to attack Soul Society, but I didn't expect you to be so smart. At this moment, the kind smile on Jinjo Kyuga's face disappeared, and instead he looked down at Senju Makotao, who was still sitting on the sofa, with arrogance and malice, and said, "But forget it. From the beginning, I didn't believe in you, the failed Queency defeated by the Gotti 13. It's just that guy thought that winning you over could play a significant role, so he gave it a try." As Jinjo Kyuga said this, Senju Makotao's speculation was almost completely confirmed. This made Chad Tosho's expression a little ugly. Originally, Chad Tosho completely regarded Kusukushin as a trustworthy organization, and that's why he brought Kurosaki Ichigo and others here to take refuge. Unexpectedly, this was just to use his relationship with Kurosaki Ichigo to gain the trust of Kurosaki teacher. Then, Jinjo Kyuga raised his hand and grabbed a spirit particle chain on his body. With a sudden pull, the entire Queency spirit particle A broke, and the Kusukushin who were originally bound tightly stood up one by one. Kurosaki Makotao, do you think that if I give some of my power to Chad Tatora, I can be easily controlled by you? Jinjo Kyuga said sarcastically, his face showing arrogance and domineering, as if he was in complete control of the situation. Ishirai heard this and mocked. What can a rat who is being chased by the 13th Gotti Squad do? It's more than enough to keep all of you here. Jinjo Kyuga said, and directly pulled off the cross chain hanging around his neck, and pressed the Death God proxy certificate on it. In an instant, the spiritual pressure on Jinjo Kyuga's body surged again, and even rolled up a materialized airwave centered on the whole person. After the airwaves slowly dissipated, Jinchokiko's appearance had undergone earth-shaking changes. At this moment, Jinchokiko not only had a bone spiral cross mask on his face, his hair color and eyes turned white, and his body was completely covered with armor made of skeletons, and there were long and fluffy white hairs dotted in the gaps between many skeletons. In addition, Jinchokiko also had a two-handed giant sword in his hand that was much more exaggerated than Zanjutsu, showing its hideousness. This amazing appearance, rather than being like a god of death, is more like a posture closer to a hollow, and it is still in the body of a human. Jinchokiko spread his hands, as if he was dominating something, and his pupils were shaking with excitement as he spoke. Did you see it? This can be called the posture of the king of Fullbring. Then, Jinchokiko backhanded each of them with a knife, and chopped directly at all the Crucian members behind him. The next moment, a strong green light burst out from the bodies of those Crucian members. When the green light faded, the uninjured Crucian members also experienced changes of varying sizes, but the same thing was that their spiritual pressure all increased significantly. If before, these Crucian members could only be regarded as vice captains or chief officers, then now all of them are comparable to the level of ordinary captains. Interesting, no wonder Mr. Jinjo had the inflated idea of challenging the God 13. Does he have this ability? Senju Cheng still had no intention of moving, but commented lightly. But if I may be frank, if it's just this level, it's probably far from enough, Mr. Jinjo. Not enough. Jinchokiko tilted his head slightly, his pupils turned down, and looked down at Senju Cheng and said, "What made you so arrogant? But it doesn't matter, before completely destroying the God 13, it's also a good choice to trample on you, the remnant of the Quincy, and go to the Seireitei." End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.